Microphone test, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll begin the meeting in one moment. If members of council could take their seats, on va commencer la réunion dans une minute. Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. C'est la réunion du Conseil municipal.
This is the June 12th City Council meeting.
13. For those of you who are able to, would you please rise for prayer and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem. Almighty God, let us work together to serve all our people. Dieu Tout-Puissant, aidez-nous à travailler ensemble afin de bien servir nos citoyens. It's my pleasure now to ask Deputy Mayor Councillor Eli El-Shantiri, who has three special guests from school in West Carleton, to sing our national anthem. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Mayor, our national anthem has been sung today by three talented young ladies, students from West Carleton Secondary School. They're all involved in the theater and musical theater for a number of years. Holly, which is on my father, is 17 years old, and she's from Carleton Place, and she learned to sing before she learned to walk. Marley, she's 18 years old, and from Woodlawn, she got 2 strikes for that. She began singing lesson when she was 13 years old. Woodlawn is the home of the lighthouse, so that's why a special place for that. And Jalen, she's 17 years old from rural Canada. She has been taking singing and piano lessons since she was 4 years old. I would like to thank these young ladies for making the trip to the City Hall and take the day off from school to sing the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons' command. Car ton bras s'est porté la paix, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Well, thank you very much to those young ladies from West Carleton. Merci beaucoup à les étudiants de West Carleton. At this time in our schedule on our agenda, it's the Mayor's City Builder Award, and I'd invite Mark O'Neill to come forward, along with Mark's counselor, Councillor Doug Thompson, as we recognize Mr. O'Neill. And it's great to have Mark here and members of his family. Welcome, bienvenue. Comes Doug. lot of things that we take for granted in our lives, day-to-day lives, and one of those is that if you're in serious trouble, you know to call 911. But believe it or not, until 25 years ago this month, this was not the case. L'une d'entre elles est de pouvoir appeler 9.
One of those is that you're in serious trouble, you can call 911. But believe it or not, until only 25 years ago, this was not the case.
In Ottawa, there were a total of 27 emergency numbers that people could call. When you combine that maze of numbers with where technology was then, you can imagine how difficult it was to get immediate assistance for a very serious issue that people needed, whether they were hurt or a crime was in progress or there was a fire. Mr. O'Neill saw this problem and decided to take action. In 1984, as just a young 21-year-old Carleton University student, Mr. O'Neill joined brothers Justin and Mark Maloney, and many of us know Justin as the emergency physician at the Ottawa Hospital, and I had the honor of serving with Mark Maloney as a city councillor and a regional councillor, and Jerry Migowski to form Action 911 in order to get local leaders to establish a 911 telephone system within the city of Ottawa. Over the ensuing 4 years, they rallied public support for this project, and on June 22nd, 1988, Ottawa's 911 system took its very first call. Au cours des 4 ans,
Over the ensuing 4 years, they rallied public support for this project, and on June 22nd, 1988, Ottawa's 911 system took its first call.
dans la ville d'Ottawa. Since that day, Ottawa's 911 system has grown to become an irreplaceable service that has saved countless of lives over the last 25 years, and in 2012 alone, fielded over 290,000 calls. Were his impact on the safety of Ottawa's residents not already positive enough, Mr. O'Neill was also a founding member of Action Paramedic. This public advocacy group successfully lobbied the Provincial Ministry of Health to upgrade the skills of all ambulance attendants to advanced care paramedics, which brought hospital-level care to the site of the emergencies. Once again, this is now the norm for ambulances, and thousands more lives are saved each year because care can be administered on-site rather than just in the hospital. The 911 system and the enhancements to the service provided by our ambulances are two of the most critically important changes for the healthcare system that our community has seen for some time. The service 911 et les
The 911 system and the enhancements to the service provided by our ambulances are two of the most critically important changes for the health of our community in the past decades.
Today, we are 10 days away from the 25th anniversary of the first call to the central 911 system in Ottawa. Many of you may know Mark as the president and CEO of the Museum of Civilization and responsible as well for the War Museum. But I think all of Ottawa can agree with me that we are in debt to for your advocacy for these two important programs that you helped found. I'm thrilled that you're able to join us here to be recognized. I know that Mark Maloney, who sat around these council table, is watching online because he was your nominator, and we thank him and Justin and Jerry for the work that they did. But this is really quite remarkable. There's a very good story in today's Ottawa Citizen that talked about how the uncoordinated approach, all of us remember, many of us remember having a little sticker, fire, police, ambulance, poison control center on the phone. And, there just wasn't the cell technology, and there just wasn't the capacity to go and remember one number. You had to remember a score of numbers depending on the emergency. So on behalf of my colleagues on City Council, Mark, thank you for your foresight and leadership back 25 years ago, and our continued success and the great work that you're doing in the Museum of Civilization. Félicitations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Your Worship and members of City Council. I'm greatly humbled by this award and share it with so many people. I'd just like today to also underline the support of Councillor Peter Clark, who wound up being very helpful in this campaign. And I also just want to say hello to my former St. Pius X High School classmate, Councillor Shirelli. Good morning, Rick. It's a real honor to be here. And lastly, I would just like to dedicate this award to my late brother William O'Neill, who at one time worked for the City of Ottawa, and in the rest of his career dedicated his work to cancer research and treatment. So I'd like to dedicate that to him today, and thank you all very, very much for this award this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now going to ask Kent Kirkpatrick to come forward because we have the presentation of the 2013 City Managers Award of Excellence. We have a brochure that's been handed out, and as some of you may know, the awards program has been in existence for a little while now, and all of the nominees gathered in this chamber yesterday, and we're very pleased today to announce the recipients in the three categories, and I'll ask the city manager to come forward and present these outstanding public servants to council.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you for holding my canes for me. I'll need those in a few minutes. I'm happy to be here today to recognize a number of outstanding employees who, through their work each day, have made our city a better place to work, live, and play. Their hard work should not go unnoticed, and we want to recognize them here today because their commitment, dedication, and determination have yielded exceptional results. Cela montre vraiment la qualité du personnel municipal.
This really shows the quality of our city staff, and it constitutes a remarkable recognition of their work and dedication.
Annual City Managers Award for Excellence. This year's winners are an excellent company. The quality and variety of nominations received made for an extremely difficult selection process, but I'm very pleased with the decisions made. I'd ask members of council, please take time and take a look at the nominations that are in the program that are in front of you today. I think you'll see what I mean in terms of the fact that the people that I'm just about to announce as winners were in very, very good company, and it was a very, very difficult decision to make. In the first category, making people a priority, the recipient is Nadine Jodoin. Nadine, where are you? There you are. Please come on down. Nadine was nominated for her outstanding contributions to the development of the city's older adult plan. Nadine receives this year's award for commitment to the building of collaborative relationships to ensure that all participants in the older adult plan initiative felt listened to and saw their feedback reflected in the final city OAP action plan. As a result of your hard work, professionalism, and commitment, the first older adult plan was approved by City Council in October of 2012. Congratulations. Yeah. In the second category, turning ideas into results, it's my pleasure to announce that the City Manager's Award this year goes to City Archivist Paul Henry. Paul, please come on down. Paul is known to many members of council was nominated for his outstanding achievements and contributions to the City of Ottawa Archives program, and for the important role that he continues to play in educating and increasing the community's knowledge and understanding of local historical events. Paul's involvement and expertise was essential during the planning, construction, and opening of the city's new Central Archives and Ottawa Public Library Materials Centre. Paul, you've effectively turned ideas into results. Thank you very much and congratulations. If you could come over here for a photograph. And now for our final category, demonstrating leadership. The recipient of this year's award is Catherine Frederick, Director of Human Resources. Catherine, please come down. Catherine played a prominent role in leading the Human Resources Department through a significant period of transformation. During a time of significant change, Catherine's leadership style fostered creativity and encouraged others to share and develop ideas, adopt new ways of thinking, and embrace new processes and technologies. Her leadership led to the introduction of important service delivery improvements within human resources. Congratulations, Catherine, and don't look so nervous. Come on over here for a photograph. Council, I would now like to ask you and everyone in this room to join me in congratulating all of our winners on their exceptional achievements. They truly are champions of and for the City of Ottawa. Standing, that never happened. You all right?
Great. Well, congratulations to all the nominees. And as Kent pointed out, I'd encourage you to go through this book. There's some great stories of innovation and ingenuity by our staff. So congratulations. Félicitations à tous.
Congratulations to all.
A roll call, please.
Conseiller Manette.
Present.
Councillor Blois.
Here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor Elshantiri.
Present.
Councillor Caudry.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Here.
Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Conseiller Fleury.
Si.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Holmes.
Here.
Councillor Hobbs.
Here.
Councillor McCrae.
Present.
Councillor Chernyshenko.
Present.
Councillor Hume.
Here.
Councillor Blais.
Here.
Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Conseiller DeRoche.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
Le quorum est à 10, Monsieur le Maire.
You have the quorum.
The minutes, adoption de procès verbeux le 22 mai. Confirmation of minutes, 22nd of May. Carried. Declaration of interest, including those originally rising from prior meetings. Déclaration de conflit d'intérêt. Receive none. Communications as printed. Regrets, no regrets filed to date. Motion to introduce reports. Councillors Elshantieri and Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Holm, that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 23B, 31A, and 32, Environment Committee Report 22, Finance and Economic Development Committee Reports 30A and 33, Planning Committee Report 50, and Transportation Committee Report 27 be received and considered.
Carried. Okay. Reconsideration motion we'll deal with after the consent agenda, so we'll come back to that. Committee reports, Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 23B, rapport numéro 23B du Comité de l'Agriculture des Affaires Rurales. We have a technical amendment by Councillor Thompson.
Yes,
introduce that, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, be resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 23B, Item 1, recommendations 1 and 3 be deleted on that motion.
And I believe staff are okay with this?
That, yes.
So the effect, Councillor Thompson, of this deletion means?
That there have, originally we were going to close the road and sell it to the Kellys, but staff have been able to work out another arrangement where the city will keep, it will stay as a road allowance and not be sold to the Kellys.
And I believe the residents are happy with
yes,
this
everyone, yes, we've worked out a resolution.
Okay. So on the amendment as presented by Councillors Thompson and Blais. Carried. On the report as amended. Carried. Item number 2, all-terrain vehicle trail network pilot project for Osgood Ward. There's an amendment. You like that held? Okay, so we'll come back, and there's an amendment from Councillor Thompson on that as well. Item number 3, zoning 5640 Bank Street, 7101 Marco Street, and 7041 Mitch Owens Road. Carried. Environment Committee Report number 22, Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, 2013-14 Work Plan. Carried. Item number 5, Solid Waste Services and City Facilities 2011 and 2012 Update. Received. And carried. Item number 6, Councillor Access to MAP, Access to Système MAP pour les membres du Conseil. Committee recommendation is presented. Carried. Item number 7, 2012 City of Ottawa Consolidated Financial Statements. There's a technical amendment by Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Shirelli, do you have the
I have it.
Technical amendment?
Seconded by Councillor Hubley. Whereas on 10th of June, 2013, staff issued a revised document 1 with respect to the 2012 City of Ottawa Consolidated Financial Statements. Therefore, be it resolved, Council approved the 2012 City of Ottawa Consolidated Financial Statements as amended by the replacement of document 1 for the version circulated on June 10th.
Okay, so on the amendment from staff, moved by Councillor Shirelli, seconded by Councillor Hubley. Carried. On the report as amended. Carried. Item number 8, Lansdowne Partnership Plan, Delegation of Authority for Administrating, Finalized, and Executed Lansdowne Partnership Plan Legal Agreements. Councillor Chernachenko would like to hold that. Item number 9, Capital Adjustments and Closing a Project, City Tax and Rate Supported. There's a technical amendment by, I believe, Councillor McCrae.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There was an outstanding commitment of $20,000 to be paid to the Cumberland Agricultural Society, and I can assure you, Councillor Blair, it was inadvertently omitted. So therefore, be it resolved that the staff report, i.e. the table set out in the financial implications section and pages 3, 5, and 11 of document 1, be amended to reflect this outstanding commitment, and that $36,214 be returned to the reserve fund.
Carried on the motion. And on the report as amended.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Monette.
I had a motion about reserves also for the Cumberland Legacy Fund.
Okay.
And I'd like to hold it.
Okay, we'll hold that, and we'll come back to that. Thank you. That over here. Item number 10, implementation of approved payment card processing solution, mise en œuvre d'une solution améliorée pour le traitement des...
Implementation of a better solution for payment cards.
Chernachenko. Item number 11, Ottawa Stadium, 300 Coventry Road, status report and negotiations with preferred offerer. There are two amending motions, so we'll hold that. Item number 12, agreement with the University of Ottawa sports field at 200 Lees Avenue. Carried. Item number 13, planning committee report number 50, zoning 43 Blackburn Avenue, zonage 43 Avenue Blackburn.
Zoning 43 Blackburn Avenue.
Transportation committee report number 27, rapport numéro 27 du comité de travail.
Transportation Committee report is 27.
Carried. Revised bulk consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove anything off the bulk consent agenda? So on the bulk consent agenda as presented. Carried. Disposition of items approved by committees under delegated authority. The Council received the list of approved by its committees under delegated authority attached as document 1. Received. Okay, so we'll now go back to the motion of reconsideration. Councillor Eglai has a motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is a very short motion. It's that motion number 55/1 be reconsidered. I'm pleased to bring this motion forward because I think the last time we voted on this matter, it was impacted by, how can I put this, insufficient information or some confusion about what happened in previous meetings in relationship to the minutes. So I want to thank staff for making themselves available over the last couple of weeks to answer any questions the councillors had in relationship to those minutes and what happened and why they need to be amended. And that's why I'm supporting and bringing this motion for reconsideration, because I think everybody around the table now has had their questions answered and can make a reasoned vote on this particular issue going forward. So thank you again to all the staff that put the hard work in over the last couple of weeks.
Okay, so the motion of reconsideration is moved by Councillor Eglai, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, requirement for 13, and the mover of the motion is on the opposite side, so it's in order. Carried on reconsideration. Dissent by Councillor Lois and Moffat and Monette and Tierney. Anyone else? Okay, so now we have the motion. Just to clarify for members of council, this is the motion that will correct the minutes. I want to thank all members of council for working on this over the last 2 weeks. In particular, I know Councillor Hugh met with Ms. Taggart to give that clarification, and I believe we have a motion by Councillor Wilkinson. Does Councillor Wilkinson have a second by Councillor Eglai to add the reports? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The motion is that so I know last time we were all concerned about how the impact of what was passed by council at that night and how it worked with that section that was omitted from the motion, was to be added to the item. And the staff have come up with, I think, a good way of dealing with this. I had spoken with them about it and said there has to be some way to make it clear of what council's intent was, and that's what this motion should be doing. I don't know if I should read all the whereases or just the resolve clause. It's the resolve clause is fairly short, and it's to require is to provide clarity to the decisions. So the motion is that the memorandum to council regarding the Preston Carling strategic directions Greenway Muse concept from the general manager planning and growth management and the memo from the city clerk and solicitor, both dated June 7th, 2013, be appended to the city council minutes of April the 24th, 2013. Mr. Mayor, the intention of this is to make sure that the work that was done at that meeting is clearly understood by having the information directly with the minutes at all times. And I think the memo from the planning staff has indicated that the concern that was expressed by the motion that was passed at that meeting is in fact not really a problem, because the application was in prior to that time, and the applicant has agreed that this would be a solution to the minutes. So I think it should solve all of the problems that were raised at that time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Blois, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I do want to thank staff for going back to the, I was going to say the drawing board, but it's not really the drawing board, in terms of trying to provide the clarity I think that might have been missing at one point, and ensuring that Council's will is properly reflected here. And at the risk of some levity, I'm not amused that we're still kicking this around 8 or 9 or 10 weeks after it first was presented at Planning Committee. But I do want to, there's one point in here, and I think the clerk's office has hit it on the head. Some of the confusion that was kicking around is that somehow the motion I brought forward was pushing an 18-story development, or allowing for an 18-story development, and we heard that on the floor here a number of times, and I want to make sure that people pick up on that. In the information that we've been provided, that is not the case. In fact, if anything, it probably preempts an 18-story development from happening there, which is on the books, which staff have already indicated basically is a complete application ready to go. Whatever would happen to it, I won't even predict. This does the opposite, and it reflects some of the will that's out there, not all of the will, and I just want to make sure that that point, that misconception does not get spread any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres commentaires?
Any other comments?
The Wilkinson-Egli motion, which in essence is attaching the two memos to the report on that, carried. And on the original Hume-Harder motion 55-1 as amended by Wilkinson-Egli, carried. Thank you all very much. The next item that's been held is the All-Terrain Vehicle Trail Network Pilot Project. Councillor Thompson has an amendment to the motion. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I just want to clarify that this has nothing to do with the multi-use pathway. This is an entirely separate item. This is an all-terrain vehicle, ATV network pilot project for Osgood Ward. And the city staff, the roads staff, the Rural Affairs Office, and the City Clerk's Office we've been working on this. It was passed at a ARAC. I wasn't able to be here at a previous council meeting, so it's moved to this one. And I just have, in consultation with the city staff, the Rural Affairs Department, and a group of residents who had concerns about the ATV trail network, and I did meet with the individuals or the group on a number of occasions over the last week and a half, and we've come up with some amendments that I think will address the concerns of the residents and some concerns for myself. So I'm just going to read the amendments that I want to make to the report, Mr. Mayor. Whereas there is a general support in the community for the proposed all-terrain ATV pilot projects, some specific concerns have been raised by residents of Blanchfield Road about ATV traffic, dust, noise, and whereas further discussion with the ATV Club have identified a route for the trail that will enable them to avoid a swampy area, and whereas the Ward Council is committed to establishing an ATV Trail Liaison Committee, which will hold meetings quarterly to monitor issues and concerns, therefore be resolved that Section 6 of the proposed bylaw be amended to reflect the start time of 8 a.m. rather than 30 minutes before sunrise, and be it further resolved that Schedule B of the bylaw be amended to add the road allowance between Concession 2, Lot 15 and 16, from the road allowance between Concession 1 and 2, Lots 15 and 16, easterly for 940 meters in the former geographic township of Osgood, and be it further resolved that staff be directed to provide an update to the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee no later than November 2014, highlighting any issues and concerns that have been raised about ATVs operating on Blanchfield Road. And Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, right now all-terrain vehicles are not allowed to drive on the road. This bylaw would allow on certain municipal roads for the ATVs to use the shoulders of the road to get from one trail network to another. This is part of the Township of North Dundas to the south of us and the Township of North Grenville to the west of us. They have similar bylaws. They've been in place for about 5 years now, and they have reported almost no problems with this type of arrangement. So, Mr. Mayor and members of council, I agreed in consultation with the ATV group and residents to offer Osgood Ward as a pilot project for this type of arrangement, hoping that when this pilot project is over that we could look at developing a system of trails and networks for the other rural areas of the city.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Are there other comments on this amendment or the main motion? So on Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor El-Shantiri's amendment, carried. On the main motion as amended, carried. Thank you very much. The next item that has been held is the item number 8, Lansdowne Partnership Plan, Delegation of Authority for administering finalized and executed plans for Lansdowne. Councillor Chernachenko asks that this be held. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I have some questions about both the necessity for what is being proposed and also some clarification about what's actually involved here. As I think we all know, one of the main thrusts of concern from those citizens across the Ottawa area who opposed this particular plan was about governance and oversight, was a belief that City Council was in effect through this partnership plan giving away some of its oversight role and allowing a private partner to have excessive control over this site. So what we're hearing from some people, and I must admit I have some concerns as well, is that this falls into that narrative, if you will, or that concern that we are, as council, delegating even more authority and giving away some of our oversight, some of our opportunities to scrutinize, say yes or no, and pose questions. Perhaps Mr. Kirkpatrick, can you describe to me what the necessity of this is, in what way we as council are why we are being asked at this time to grant you and staff this authority?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So as the background to the report indicates, this is something that could have and I guess should have been dealt with at the time last October when Council was approving the agreements. There's a document that's annexed to the back of the staff report, and in which identifies all of the instances where in the thousands of pages of agreements that now have been executed between the city and OSEG in accordance with Council direction last October, all of the instances where an approval or a consent from the city for OSEG to be able to do a particular thing is required, and you'll see that I think that document's about 20 pages long. There are many, many such instances. As Council knows, the agreements that they approved the framework for are very, very comprehensive, and a lot of work was done to identify as much as possible all of the future opportunities for things to take place under the broad agreements, and staff were very diligent in extracting from OSEG that the city approval or consent would be required in many cases. In most cases, with the city acting reasonably, and often there's many criteria in the agreements that are identified that an arbitrator, if there was a dispute and dispute resolution kicked in, that an arbitrator would be able to look at to determine whether or not the city was acting reasonably in not providing approval or consent. All of that to say that a lot of these things are, a lot of these issues are, I wouldn't put them necessarily in the order of housekeeping. They're significant, but there's a lot of context to them. The agreement speaks to what the issues are anticipated to be, what is important in terms of whether or not an approval or consent will be given. There are a lot of these things. At one time, when Council may recall, some members of Council may recall, there was, Council had directed that staff give consideration and do research to the establishment of a municipal services corporation, which Council would delegate authority and responsibility to administer these agreements. In the end, Council determined that, and based on staff recommendation, that the Municipal Services Corporation was not the way to go, that a committee of Council would receive an annual report on the administration of the agreements with OSEG. So there are many of these things. They will come forward through the construction of this site. There are also many of them that apply during the ongoing operations of the site once it's constructed. Staff felt that it's reasonable to delegate authority, to recommend to Council that authority be delegated to staff in order to not to amend these agreements or provide any approvals or consents that these agreements do not identify the need for, but that within the legal and the financial frameworks that Council approved and that are identified in these agreements, that staff be delegated the authority to provide those approvals or consents if and when OSEG asks for them. It's important, I think, to identify that the recommendation is that the authority not be delegated to myself or one member of staff, but that in reflection of the fact that the framework is the legal and financial constraints that Council approved in the agreements, that it's myself as well as the City Clerk and Solicitor as well as the City Treasurer that's required. The three of us are consideration prior to the approval or consent being granted, and that we report back on an annual basis if that delegated authority is used.
Okay. Is there, best described, is there anything new then in what we are being asked for today?
Nothing new other than the recommendation that to deal with those items that are identified in the annex to the report, that the authority, rather than those every time being required to come forward to Committee and Council for approval, that authority be delegated to staff to do that, and to report back to Council when that authority has been used.
So as I understand it, our collective oversight as a council would be on an annual basis when we are receiving reports. What situations might you foresee, or at least can you imagine situations where something would be sufficiently of importance, something going wrong, so to speak, budget overruns, where it would come back to Council?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Chernyshenko. If there was ever a request from OSEG that was outside of what Council had approved in the agreements, those would come back to Council, of course. If there was a request that was identified, an issue that was identified in the agreements, however, the request did not fall within the financial framework that was approved, those would come back to Council. And quite frankly, if there was ever a request where we thought that there was some grayness around that, the three of us sitting here, those would come back to Council as well. So, and perhaps the City Solicitor would like to speak to that, but we will be conservative, of course, in the use of this delegated authority should Council provide it.
Thank you. A couple of specific questions. There's been, I imagine we've all concerned, surely we've all received some correspondence. I suspect I'm not the only one that has. Some particular points have been raised. There's a concern that's been raised that the urban park budget has been reduced from $35 million to $25 million. I think I know the answer to this, but I wanted clarification whether that is in fact the case. The RFP has gone out to tender, I believe, for $25 million, but the overall budget allocation to the urban park was $35. What accounts for that difference?
Nothing has changed in the work program that was approved by the LDRP and then by council for in terms of the construction of the urban park. I think the significant issue that speaks to a difference between 35 and 24 or $25 million is that the $35 million, the overall urban park program also included the relocation, the renovation and refurbishment, reprogramming, adaptive reuse of the horticultural building, which was approximately a $10 million budget. So that's the difference between the $25 and the $35 million.
I thought that was the case, but I wanted to be sure that was verified here or confirmed here in public. So in no way has the urban park program, the approved program, now that it's gone out to tender, been reduced, watered down. Will we see a lesser version of what council and the LDRP have approved?
No, that's my understanding. There is always, you'll recall some of the discussions being an LDRP, value engineering that goes on as designs are brought through to final construction plans. But in terms of the elements and the standards that the LDRP approved, those are all part of the documents that have been put out to the pre-qualified bidders.
So we can expect that the bidders will look for ways to deliver everything we've asked for, but in the most cost-effective way possible. And we would be scrutinizing, staff, our frontline oversight, would be scrutinizing to make sure that nothing was being watered down, no corners cut.
That's correct.
Okay, great. I'm counting on that. And finally, there is this issue of Minto sole sourcing, construction of one or several of the buildings for time savings, if you will, time efficiencies. Contracts will be going to Minto. Can you explain what that's all about and in what way that is or is not contrary to what council had approved and our regular competitive procurement process here at the city?
Mm-hmm. So the construction of the mixed-use buildings was, as council will remember, the responsibility of OSEG. They are doing that. They're managing that construction program. The use of the term sole sourcing, OSEG has the flexibility to contract with whomever they wish to build those mixed-use buildings. The issue why it's identified as an example in the report of where the agreements require OSEG to get the city's consent in that regard is that there are in several places in the agreements requirements that should OSEG wish to transact with a non-arm's length party, and in this case Minto is a non-arm's length party because Minto forms part of the ownership of OSEG, they require the city's approval in that case. And those are blanket statements that are in there, and it's identified that they require the city's approval to do so. Such approval, in terms of, remember me talking about the criteria in terms of reasonable or non-reasonable in terms of if the city did not provide the approval. The requirement in this case is that if it's an arm's length transaction, that the transaction is identified that it does not involve any additional profit for a non-arm's length party, i.e. that the transaction will be at or below market value. And I can tell you that our staff, REPTO staff, have looked at the fee that's proposed that OSEG would pay Minto to manage the construction of the podium that they're then going to they then have the air rights to build the residential and office tower I'm part of, and we are satisfied that the fee that is proposed to be paid is meets that test.
Okay, thank you. Well, I thank you for answering these questions that, for the most part, has allayed all of my concerns. I certainly urge you and I suppose the triumvirate in front of us, wherever there is the slightest doubt or gray area, as you put it, that the opportunity to come back to council, to debate, to do our job as overseers, that we have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernachenko. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to follow up with a couple questions. First, just following on Councillor Chernachenko on the issue of Minto. I just want to understand, if the city didn't have a private sector partner, would this still fit within our city procurement policies, or would this be outside the policy?
The city's procurement policy would typically call for a competitive tender process to construct the building, but as I was indicating in response to Councillor Chernyshenko's question, while the agreement with OSEG required that to happen in terms of the buildings that we were the funding, the stadium and the urban park buildings, which were all competitively tendered, OSEG is not required to competitively tender the contracts to construct the mixed-use buildings. I can tell you that I know they went through a competitive process, but it was not exactly the same as the city would run, where it was posted on Mercs. Anyone who met the qualifications would be able to compete. They went through an invitation process, but I can tell you it was competitively there was competition in the process that they used to hire the contractors to build the mixed-use buildings.
Right, but not for the retail and the other pieces that they want to add on now.
No, that's what I mean by the mixed-use buildings.
Okay, thank you. Just want to talk about the delegated authority that you're asking for today as well. And Mr. Kirkpatrick, let me just say I have no doubt that you would act reasonably should we give you the delegated authority. I wouldn't question that whatsoever. But I do think that in the city, that transparency on our big projects are really important. So I want to understand exactly what we'd be giving up. And I've been concerned right from the beginning of this process about the budget for the stadium and change work orders, because I know enough about construction to know there's no way you can construct that without change work orders or without that add up to a lot more money. So how much contingency, can you just remind me how much contingency you have to play with in that construction budget?
There's contingency in terms of both the stadium and the city's share of the parking garage. I would have to speak with Mr. Manconi to give you the exact numbers, but I could get those quite very quickly shortly.
Okay, is it 10%, ballpark?
I can't remember the percentages. The figure of $10 million is in my mind. I just need to confirm whether that's for the stadium or the stadium and the parking garage.
Okay.
But before the end of this council meeting, I could get you that information.
I guess the question is, does this delegated authority give you greater flexibility to move money around without coming back to council?
No, and that's exactly, that's a good pointed question in terms of what does this mean, the condition that it must fall within the financial framework that was approved by council and council approved the agreements. This authority does not allow for the budget to be adjusted or in any way beyond what council approved last October.
Can you maybe give me 2 or 3 examples of what this authority would allow you to do?
So I think first I'll reiterate the example that's in the report that Councillor Chernyshenko was asking some questions about. So it was what OSEG has decided is that it makes better sense for the contractors who will be building the overbuilds on the buildings, both the residential and the office tower, to manage the construction of the podium buildings that are underneath them. It will result better integrated planning, scheduling, project management. They can expect better quality of construction and reduced overall cost. And so, although it wasn't contemplated at the time, they've decided that it's a good idea that Minto would actually manage the construction of the structure of the entire building, podium and overbuild. They don't require city approval to do that, other than the fact that Minto is a non-arm's length party to OSEG, and so they're caught by the general provision that if they're not allowed to have non-arm's length transactions to the extent that they wish to, for good reason, as we believe is the case in this instance. They require the city's approval to do so.
Okay, so can you give me another example of what you might...
Another example would be maybe not construction related, but in the future, to the extent that OSEG wishes to, the agreements speak to what is a repair or a refurbishment of the stadium as an example, and it sets dollar values that OSEG is allowed to reinvest in the stadium to refurbish it.
Once it gets to a certain dollar value, that requires city approval, acting reasonably, and that would be another example of an approval that we're recommending the consideration of be granted to staff.
So what you're proposing is a reporting back to council mechanism on an annual basis. That seems like a lot. In this construction period, when's it going to be finished? 2 years from now or 1 year?
I hope not. 1 year from now, yes.
So you wouldn't be reporting back until it's finished?
We will report back at the end of 2013.
Yeah.
And at the end of 2014. So there would be one reporting before it's finished. And remember, most of these involve issues that are post-construction and after the commencement of operations.
Okay. And is there any reason to think that you should have some mechanism where you would at least be discussing these issues with the ward councillor?
Off the top of my head, I can't think of examples where that would be the case, but of course, if we thought that what they were asking was in some way going to have an effect on the surrounding community, we would consult with the ward councillor, as staff know they need to do whenever there's an issue that staff are considering.
Okay. My gut is an annual report back on a project that's moving this quickly is not sufficient. I think there should be more reporting back to council on a more frequent basis than that.
So, if I may, Councillor, the reporting on the construction of this project is on a much more frequent basis than that, quarterly, formally, and then as you know, on a weekly basis, we issue an update on how the construction is going.
So if you're reporting quarterly on the construction, why wouldn't we report quarterly on this aspect of delegated authority as well?
I have no concern with a more frequent reporting on the use of this delegated authority. We identified annually because we know that on an annual basis there will be a very comprehensive report on what has taken place at Lansdowne. And again, I'm thinking more post-construction during operations, where here's a reporting on the activity that took place on the site, on the financial performance, all of those things.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to draft a motion not to take away the annual comprehensive reporting, but to add to it to add to that quarterly construction report that you bring to council on Lansdowne Park, a report on the delegated authority as well. Thank you.
I have, Councillor, the answer to the question on contingency.
Are you moving that motion now, Councillor?
Yes, if Leslie's writing it for me.
So it's 10.1 million, so I had the number correct. It's $6.5 million for the stadium and $3.6 million for the city's share of the parking garage.
Of the what?
Of the parking garage.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Through you to Ken Kirkpatrick. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I was looking at some of I take it that all the delegated authority are the things in this chart. Because some of them are things I think that would be of interest to people more, like the approval of retail releases and things. And I fully understand and support the fact that you have to make decisions relatively quickly, and getting approval through a committee is a very slow process. So I don't have a big problem in that happening, but these are some of the things that were a little bit controversial at the time, and what kind of businesses are going to be there. There's supposed to be certain ones. There's always an interpretation of those. And I'm just wondering, I agree with Councillor Deans about more frequent reporting back on at least some of these ones that I would think would be more contentious. And I'm just wondering if, I think you understand which those are because we've debated them for many times over the last few years, that if it's something that has been contentious, that there should be some information put out, even if it's just a little quick memo saying that all the leases that have been approved and these are what they are, because these are the ones that the public is going to question. They're already questioning a little bit about giving too much delegated authority. But if this was a city project, we'd give that to our own staff, and really that's what you're asking for here. Am I correct in that?
Yes, Mayor. Yep. And
so I would like to see, and going through all of these terms and conditions of retail mortgages, if there's a failure there and we have to take over the retail businesses, those mortgages are going to be really important for us as well. So these are the kind of things that have a long-term impact on the city, or could have. And those are the ones that I think you have to have a really strong diligence, and not just from yourself, but from people who have technical knowledge on these. So I take it that in things like that, you would, so first say for retail mortgages, you would get somebody who understands retail mortgages. I don't think we have anybody on staff that really does, to make sure that they are not going to be detrimental to the city in the future. That's what I'm really looking at.
Yes, and I just want to highlight that as an example, in terms of retail mortgages, there it is the elements of the agreement that deal with that are extensive. There was a lot of thought and expertise, that kind of expertise you're talking about, that went into the drafting of the agreement. So it is very tightly wired what is required in terms of the retail mortgages in the agreements. Belt and suspenders, we also added, you need to provide that information to the city, and the city needs to approve it prior to entering into those. But there's a lot of detail in there, because it is an important issue, and it was important to establish at the time the agreements were entered into what latitude OSEG would have in terms of the retail mortgages, percentages of market value, term, all of that kind of thing.
More important, in fact, is what happens if you have bankruptcies. As I have learned in the past, with a bankruptcy, the city could, it's not this city, but Canada, could actually lose land because the mortgagee would have priority over it. And those are the kind of things that I'd like to have someone, if there's any worry about that, because that can happen in business.
So, Mayor, or Acting Mayor, Deputy Mayor, I apologize. I would say very little worry. We had some of the best legal expertise available from BLG on, Morty Gross, which Council knows, probably one of the more preeminent private-public sector partnership lawyers in the country, very, very familiar with retail, all kinds of commercial leases and structures like that, and he was instrumental in developing what we negotiated with OSEG in those agreements. So it is very, very tightly wrapped.
Okay. So what I'm really saying is, as long as they're making just I'll call them the routine type of approvals, because it's just moving forward under the agreements, I have no problem with any of that. If there's something extraordinary, because things can happen that you don't think ahead about, it's impossible to think of everything, especially in something this complicated, I would expect that you would send a memo or something out. That's been what was happening in the past, and I would expect that still to happen. And I would like to have a little bit more frequent reports. Not necessarily the end of the year one might be much more detailed, but at least just a brief outline of what types of things have been improved on a more frequent basis.
Yes, and just to highlight again, if it's extraordinary, if it's something that wasn't contemplated by and specifically addressed in the agreements, we will not be using delegated authority there. Those would be coming back to committee and council.
So the delegated authority is only under the agreements that we've already approved?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Aguilar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be seconding Councillor Dean's motion about more reporting, but I share her position that quite comfortable that you're going to be exercising your due diligence and going forward. But on that point, I just want to sort of bring out the actual process that's going to be going through, because it sounds like what we're doing here is giving you sole authority to go ahead and make decisions. Yet when I read the committee recommendation, you're not going to do any of that, as I read it, without first consulting and concurring with the gentleman and the lady sitting next to you. In other words, you're not going to assure me, and I think you are going to, and the rest of council, that you're going to look at all the legal implications, all the financial implications, before you sign on the dotted line to make any of those changes.
Mr. Mayor, I go yes, first of all. The answer is yes. I can see I can see where there's room to maybe, is it the city manager has a delegated authority, or is it the three of us? And if you'd like to, I can tell you that it will take 3 signatures to approve it, but that's not what the recommendation specifically speaks to, and I'd be happy with an adjustment to make it clear that all three of us would need to agree to provide the approval or consent before
I understood that's what it was, but I think it may make some other people around the table more comfortable with the decision this morning. So that's a friendly amendment.
Okay, anything else, Councillor?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, we approved the, call it in bulk plan. All this asks is to allow the manager the right to administer what we've already approved. And I really think the fact that 24 of us around the table with the massive technical expertise in reviewing the detail is a bit embarrassing.
Okay. So are there any other questions? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres commentaires?
Any other comments?
Okay, Councillor Deans and Eglai that the words quarterly and be inserted just before the term annual report in recommendation 2. And we've heard from the city manager you're comfortable with this. So on the amendment, carried. On the report as amended, carried. Dissent by Councillor Deans. All right, item number 9. We have capital adjustments and closing a project. Sorry, Councillor Chernyshenko and Councillor Chernyshenko to dissent. Item number 9, capital adjustments and closing of project, city tax and rate supported. We do have Councillor Manette, I believe, has a amendment, and just to recall, we have already approved the McCrae-Hobbs amendment with respect to Cumberland Reserve Fund. So, Councillor Manette, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did check with the Finance Department on this, and I'll just read what the motion says. Whereas City Council approved the Cumberland Reserve Fund in 2001 for funding the community-related projects in Cumberland, and whereas staff have worked with the Councillor's Office and community members to maximize the opportunities for reinvestment in their prospective communities, and whereas ward councillors were erroneously advised that all funds were committed and therefore not given the opportunity to add additional funds, therefore be it resolved that the fund not be closed and that the balance of $36,214 be used for additional projects being completed by December 31st, 2013. What this means, Mr. Mayor, is that for the past 4 or 5 years, we were told that we had $40,000 left in the Cumberland legacy funds, and just recently at FEDCO, did this come out that we actually have an added $36,214. It was strictly an error, and this will allow Ward 19 and Ward 1 to use those funds for what they were intended to be used for within this year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
On that, carried. Thank you. On the report as amended by the 2 amendments, carried. Thank you. Item number 10, implementation of improved payment card processing services solution. Councillor Chernyshenko would ask that that be held. Councillor?
Thank you very much. Actually, I have a specific question that I really want to bring out a point more than anything here. I think there's a public perception we all fall into that when we pull out a piece of plastic, whether it's to pay the corner store or to pay the City of Ottawa, that somehow there's no cost to that transaction, virtually no cost or no cost to us, no cost to the recipient of the money. And yet, I know that there is a cost, and sometimes a significant one. Can you describe to me the layers, if you will, of cost if I or any other citizen were to decide to pay for any service, including our taxes that the city delivers, with a credit card? And particularly, I'm interested in the different levels of my gold card, my Air Miles reward card. So I understand it. Those also have extra costs related to that. And who bears those?
That's a good question, through you, Mr. Mayor. The acceptance of payment cards is not free to the retailer. And as a retailer, when the city accepts credit cards, it does cost us money. The amount of the money that it costs us depends on the particular card that is presented by the person who wants to pay for a transaction. The range of those costs go from about 1.75% to, I believe, 2.63%. The plain Jane cards that have no rewards, no cash back associated with it would be at the lower end, and the loyalty cards that have 1%, 2% cash back, or air miles, Aeroplan, vacation rewards, they would be at the higher end. When you, in the agreement that you sign with your acquirer, when you agree to accept credit cards, you are not able to discriminate. You cannot say, I will not take this card because it's going to cost me more because of its rewards, but I will take the lower cost ones. If you have two people standing in front of you, three people standing in front of you, one paying cash, one paying with a plain Jane credit card, and one paying with a loyalty card at the higher end, the city would receive three different amounts of money for that transaction. So it's certainly a good point that the acceptance of payment cards is not free, and it isn't always the same cost to the retailer when somebody decides to pay with a payment card.
So if one of our good citizens is using their premium card for which they're getting cash back from their bank or miles towards their next holiday in Cuba, in fact, the city would be bearing some of that cost. That's where that money comes from that allows that nice credit card company to make, or bank to make those benefits available to you?
Absolutely, that's correct.
So this proposal then, this recommendation we have in front of us is really to try and acknowledge that there is, although there is a convenient element, and it's not that we want to discourage citizens from using their cards by any means, there is a cost, and we have to compensate, or at least we have to show how that cost is being borne.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one quick question. It's on the D, the third-party providers, and you gave an example as the court system where they charge their own fees. Is there any possibility that the city would take some of the things we already do now and make them into third-party providers? Because that, when we contract things out, that does happen. That would then end up increasing fees to people, or is this going to be, are the things that we're doing now going to stay a city operation so that we don't have anything additional happening?
Initially, we'll stick with the existing agreements that we have, and as they expire, we will look at city-owned solutions.
So we have, would we then be informed if that's going to happen, if it would make a change in what people have to pay? Because I think that becomes certainly a concern for our residents.
Yes, we would.
And as their list, you've given an example of the court system. How many of these are there around now? That are there a whole bunch, or is it just a few?
We just have two. Your Worship, we have payments for parking tickets. There's a fee of $1.50, and payments for provincial offences fines, and the fee is $3.
So those are the only two at the moment. Of course, the parking one changed when we had the contract. So if we go with the contract to something else, we could have another change.
That's correct, and we would come back to you if we were doing our own solution.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Great, thank you. So on the report, carried. Next item is item 11, Ottawa Stadium, 300 Coventry Road, status report and negotiations with preferred offerer, Stade d'Ottawa, 300 Chemin Coventry.
Ottawa Stadium, 300 Coventry Road.
Introduce your first one, seconded by Councillor Monette, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. The motion is derived regarding, as it evolved during the debate at committee, and it had to do with specific wording, Mr. Mayor, in the report that staff would be using reasonable efforts to find parking with regards to the 850 parking spots. So I'm not going to read the whereases, Mr. Mayor, just that therefore be it resolved. One, that the terms and conditions of the request for offers for a best offer to lease the Ottawa Stadium facility in the long term specify that the city is committed to ensuring that 850 parking spots will be made available on-site weekday evenings and weekends to support baseball operations in the event of the future development of the stadium parking lot. And number two, that the term reasonable efforts identified in the report currently before council be replaced by the phrase assistance, but is not contractually obligated in the terms and conditions of the request for offers. So, Mr. Mayor, what this motion does is provide specificity to council when we're making this decision. It provides good language for staff to rely on when they are doing requests for offers. And in the event that anyone who accepts the opportunity to work with the city comes back and wants to try and understand what reasonable efforts meant, we've actually now confirmed what the intention of the people drafting the contract at the time was, and the intention is that we're going to do our very best, but we are not contractually obligated. So we don't put ourselves in a situation where we're being faced with commercial arbitration with regards to this issue.
Great. Thank you for that, because I know you raised this at FEDCO, and appreciate you and Councillor Manette bringing that forward. And the second motion I've received is from Councillor Manette, seconded by Councillor Clark. Councillor Manette, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll go through the therefore also. Therefore, be it resolved that requests for offers state that the city's preference is for affiliate minor league baseball for the stadium, including AAA, Class AA, Class A, followed by independent and non-affiliated leagues in that order. And that the requests for offers state that the city reserves the right to present none or one or more of the received offers to lease for council consideration. Be it therefore resolved that the request for offers documents state that the responses may only be submitted by, and the city will only negotiate with the owner-operator of an existing franchise proposed for relocation to Ottawa, or the owner-operator of the new franchise to be located in Ottawa. Offers may not be submitted, and the city will not negotiate with a broker on behalf of a franchise owner during the request for offer process.
Okay, thank you. So now, any other motions that people have at this point, so we can get them on the record? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres motions?
Any other motions for the record?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm always puzzled how we go from, or what the road is that we've been down here, where we come from, let's say, a couple of failed endeavors, baseball endeavors, and out of the ashes rises something bigger, better, and more expensive. And I've got a few questions to staff, how we came up with these recommendations. And I'm not sure who's the right person to ask, because it's more of the economic development, real estate development questions, as opposed to baseball or recreation and et cetera. So, Kent, I don't know if you're the right one to start with.
I'll try.
So, I was looking at the previous report, and as council approved the previous report, and we're ready to invest $5.7 million plus operating costs, and we had quite a debate about what kind of a PY or how many bodies would be required, et cetera. So we were committed at that point for $5.7 million plus operating costs to come up with a franchise that would play here. And we went out to the market, kicked the tires in the market, and we've come back with basically really isn't a viable interest out there that works under that equation. Is that what I see here? We talked to 3 proponents, some intermediaries tried to strike a deal for us, but nothing came out of it.
Yes, as the report indicates, I think what staff learned through the last effort was that it is going to require a higher initial investment in the. It's not just enough to invest in the deferred life cycle maintenance of the facility, that the facility is going to need to be refurbished as well, if it's affiliated baseball that we're targeting. There was a range of what was discussed with the people that were engaged in that process. It ranged from $10 to $30 million. I want to highlight that's an initial investment. We won't know how much of that, if any, the city would be required to finance or to pay until we see how much it might be proposed that the city is going to get back through a lease and long-term operation of the facility.
My recollection was, though, the the $5.7 million that we were committed to, none of that was going to be recovered, if I remember correctly. In fact, I think the rent agreements that we were probably going to enter into, at least the last one we had, barely covered the the cost of keeping the doors open, and there wasn't really an optimism that we were going to recover any money towards the capital. In fact, we weren't going to be able to cover our own operating costs for the stadium. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was a contribution. The last report identified that in addition to that investment in terms of the ongoing life cycle maintenance of the facility, that both the city and what was proposed under the lease at that time, there would be contributions from the city and the tenant towards the life cycle reserve fund.
Mm-hmm. And now, in the meantime, we're proceeding with the overpass, the pedestrian overpass from the train station or the transit station over to the other side of the Queensway, which will serve not just the stadium, but the whole site plus the other facilities around there. How much are we investing in that one again?
I'd have to ask Nancy to talk about the budget on that, but you're correct that major benefit to the stadium, but also benefits both sides of the Queensway and the connectivity between them.
I'll get back to you with the final number that we have in cash allowance.
So the number I remember is somewhere 7, 8, 9 million. Would that be ballpark figure?
That's correct, and it's been bundled with the
Queensway widening.
The Queensway project. We've advanced the piers, and so I was just going to get you the number as to what is remaining.
Okay. So when I look at what's the potential for development on this site, what I see in this report is that we're actually tying our hands here in the sense that you look under future developments, and it talks about any offer needs to acknowledge that the city will be undertaking a strategy to exercise its development opportunity in the parking lot area of the site, which is fine. I'm fully in agreement with it. But we're basically saying we wouldn't do this for 10 years. And I'm trying to understand, here we are building a pedestrian overpass that links up to our transit system. By the way, a station that's well served right now, probably better served than it will be under LRT in the future. But we're basically saying we won't even look at this for 10 years. And when we do look at it, any respondent that comes forward needs to identify any potential disruption anticipated during the construction phase and propose measures to mitigate those disruptions. We're basically telling any potential respondent, and this isn't the baseball respondent the way I read it, this is potential development of that site. Basically, you better, here are the conditions, and they're going to limit you so badly, don't even come forward with any plans. Is that the way we read this?
The way we approached this issue was that one of the things that we heard during the last exercise was that a longer term, because more capital is going to need to be invested by the city and by the proponent, that a longer term lease was necessary. Staff felt that if we're talking about a longer term lease, that we should make the structure need to be clear that the city would have the option to redevelop that parking lot. The 10 years was focused on, again, what we heard from some of the proponents about the amount of time that they would require to build a stable baseball operation. We also looked at that the best potential for the city to redevelop that site would be after the light rail system was completed and had been operational for a period of time, so that the market understood the success of that, and that's how we'll extract the most value in terms of moving forward with the redevelopment at that time. And in terms of what we've identified as the only conditions that the city would agree to as part of the option to move to redevelop was the continuation of the 850 spots and the fact that the construction would be sensitive to the continuing operation of the baseball during the season. And we put those in because, frankly, we felt that if council was not prepared to acknowledge that those would be things that the city would agree to in order for the redevelopment to move forward, that we would likely not receive proposals, because ongoing parking was identified as a critical issue by the people we were speaking to.
But what we're doing is we're tying our hands with respect to any future development opportunities. So I guess the real question is, the last time when we dealt with this, I think it was February 2012, some of us were holding our noses because of the price tag already, and we're basically going on a whim and a prayer and crossing our fingers, closing our eyes, hoping something would come out of it that would preserve the stadium, preserve baseball. That obviously hasn't happened. When we went out and kicked the tires, it's very obvious. The market is telling us there isn't an interest under the conditions that we went out in, and we need to stick a lot more money into this. And you're mentioning 10 to 30 million, and that's the initial investment. At what point did we decide it's baseball with a little bit of side development as opposed to looking at the full site, the full value of the site, and the development potential? So can you tell me what is the size of the site? What's the value of the total site? And have our economic development folks looked at the potential development here, the potential value of development? So 3 questions before I run out of time.
We'll have to get back to you with that. I can tell you that that type of focus on the site hasn't, the last time that we looked at that in a deep way was back, I think it was the previous term of council, when the previous council considered whether or not they wanted to look at a different redevelopment scenario for the entire site, or whether or not there was the opportunity to keep baseball as part of the long-term vision for that site. This council, and as the report indicates in the background, this council 18 months ago was very clear that they wanted to run an exercise to identify if it was possible to secure a long-term use for that facility related to the purpose of the facility when it was built, and that is baseball operations.
But I think, sorry to jump in, but I think what happened was as I said, we crossed our fingers and did all kinds of funny things hoping something would come out of it. We went out to the market. The market is giving us an answer. And yet we're back here proposing something similar but more expensive, even more long-term. The real question that we should have been asking at this point, or what should have been before us, is do you want to continue with this exercise? And maybe we can still answer that question, but I doubt whether we'll do that. Do you want to continue with this exercise, or do you want to go to the market and say, what is that land really worth? What can happen there? And what are the best opportunities for the future, or are we going to lose those opportunities? If we continue with this report, we will lose opportunities, we'll lose potential development that could be happening there. That question hasn't been asked, and that's where we should have gone from the 2012 report when it didn't materialize the way we expected, as opposed to saying, let's get in even deeper. And there's an expression out there about a pig and a poke, and I think by approving what's before us today, that's really what we're doing. We're buying a pig and a poke. And my time has run up, unfortunately.
So, Councillor, thank you.
I guess my question is why staff wouldn't have come back.
Your time is up, but thank you.
My question, though, is why we wouldn't have come back with something different than another baseball player.
Councillor, we know that you're opposed to this and opposed to the baseball stadium, so you can propose a motion. What would you like to do with the site? So it's up to you. It's no good to just criticize.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I will come back with a motion that says go back to the market and see what you can do.
Well, then draft the motion, get a seconder, and put it on the floor. That's how it works. Councillor Shirley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind here. First of all, contrary to the myth that many people are trying to propagate, the discussion about cost for this project, when it talks about $10 to $30 million, that's not a net cost to the taxpayers. That's a gross cost of changes that could be made if certain proponents were to come forward with a different configuration of an offer. And within that type of business model, there would be revenues to the city that would offset costs. There would be assumption of costs by the partner. And so you're not looking at anywhere near the kind of frightful figure that some people want to put out there. Secondly, I think this is a simple question of what you want to do with this stadium. We have a purpose-built stadium, built for professional baseball. And it's not built for Little League baseball. It's not built for soccer. It's built for professional baseball. We have this facility that has been paid for by the public. A public facility that sits there right now, neglected, without basic maintenance having been done on it for the past, more than a decade. And so the question is, what do you do with it? Do you tear it down and put up condos or whatever it's going to be, since they seem to be the solution to everything now? Or do you try to make it work? And recognizing that if you don't, you're probably not going to get one back for many, many decades. I think the right decision is the decision council made last time, which is to try to make it work. We went out, went through negotiations that didn't conclude with the outcome we wanted, but they did teach us two things. One is that there are a number of people out there who would be very interested, but they probably would want a different business model. Well, this report and this recommendation lets us create a different business model by actually letting somebody else propose a different model, different configuration, different setup at the stadium, and different relationships. So it really opens it up to more opportunities, to ones we hadn't envisioned before, to ones that could be a lot more successful. So I think when we move on this today, no matter what you hear on any other aspect of it, it still boils down to one question. Do we tear down the stadium and just give up? Or do we make a reasonable effort to renew the stadium for the future, for our economic development, for our tourism efforts, and try to get baseball back in Ottawa, try to get it operating successfully by partners and a model that can make it work. So it's really just that choice. And obviously I think we should make the best effort we can and try to make the best of this stadium and try to renew it and bring baseball back.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Shirelli. Councillor Wilkinson, questions and comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief one. In reading this, we're not approving any additional money in this from what I read from the recommendations.
That's correct.
Because there's a lot of talk about the $30 million and things of this nature, and that is just saying, depending on what happens, this may happen and may have to be paid. It may be paid from, be recovered from a promoter or not. All of that would come back at a later date, depending on what comes out from this seeking for proposals. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay. So all we have really approved right now is the $5.7 million that we've already approved for doing maintenance on repairs on the buildings, which we approved a while back.
The only thing I'd add, Councillor, is that that's what Council approved as a budget. I think the report recommends something close to another $700,000 that we'd spend on life cycle maintenance, and we would fund it out of that authority. But that's the extent of the expenditure that the report contemplates. Anything beyond that would not be spent until we're back to report to Council on the results of the process.
But that $700,000 is not in our budget right now, so that would have to be approved as we do for any ongoing maintenance on any facility in a future budget.
The report, I didn't know, that's work that we'd like to do this year. It's work that's required regardless of future tenancy in the building, and the report identifies that it would be funded from the $5.7 million that Council approved.
So at this point, that's all we've approved, plus the $50,000 you've got in here for the number 3. I think there's been some misunderstanding by the public in that we're going out to spend $30 million, bang, 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 and I'm not opposed to going out and making one more try at this. If it doesn't work out, we're obviously going to have to look at this again, but I just don't want to approve any additional money until we really see what it would mean and how it would be paid back and all the rest of it that goes with it. And that's what you're confirming, so I can tell the people who are complaining to me that's the situation.
That is the situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Deans, please.
Mr. Mayor, I remember the stadium when I got elected back in the mid-90s was a problem. And we lost a lot of money even when we had a tenant in there. We had problems with the concessions. We had all kinds of problems. And this stadium, from the get-go, never performed the way it was anticipated to perform. And since we've lost the tenant, I think it's just gotten worse for us in terms of the investment that our taxpayers have made in this. So I'm just wondering if anybody has added up how much money this stadium to date has cost our taxpayers.
Not that I'm aware of, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me?
Not that I'm aware of.
Could somebody calculate that? I think to make a good decision about the future of the stadium, we really need to understand what it has cost. And I've heard some of my other council colleagues ponder about when we pull the plug. And at some point, I actually think the time has come. I actually think that we need to consider options other than trying to find a tenant when a tenant doesn't exist. And we've tried several times unsuccessfully where we keep losing money on the stadium. It keeps costing our taxpayers money. It's valuable, developable land with LOT coming to it. And I think it's time that we considered our options on the site beyond just a stadium where there doesn't seem to be anyone wanting to play. So I would say to you, Mr. Kirkpatrick, maybe it's direction to, one, add up how much this has cost the taxpayers of Ottawa, because I think the number would be very large, and two, start looking at what the options would be for redevelopment beyond just a ball team.
Mr. Mayor, we can do the research on the first. That's information that we can put together. The second piece, though, I think is consistent with Councillor Blose's position, which is a different direction than the one the report recommends, which is consistent with the last direction we were given by Council, and I would suggest that Council should provide different direction before we would undertake that work.
Okay, thank you.
And I think if we're going to go down this path, we'll go and ask how much does every recreation center in the city lose? Because guess what? They lose money. I believe the Greenboro Community Center loses money. I believe the library in Greenboro loses money. We're not a profit center, and these facilities do cost taxpayers money, and we can go down one of two paths. We can either, as Councillor Shirelli pointed out, try again and not give up, or we go down the path that we say we're going to get out of that business altogether. So that's the choice we have to make, and this is the time to make it. So, Councillor Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that the current proposal is quite interesting. You know, some of my colleagues remember the stadium a few years ago, and you must concede that there were some very good years. The stadium was totally filled to capacity for several years. Of course, it's difficult to see the difficulties of the recent years. But I'm totally in favor of having several uses in this site. So when we turn to the public and we ask for offers to various interests, there should be more than one use. Baseball is great. It's a baseball stadium. But for the majority of the time, baseball is only 60 days a year. We have over 300 days left. We could have commercial use. We could have other sport uses there. And when we look at the use of our recreational and cultural facilities in Ottawa, the ones that work the best are the ones that have more than one use. It's rare that we have just a plain arena now or just a plain pool. There's many other uses combined with it. So, of course, while talking to the various employees, I was reassured to know that there might be advantages for the group that will be interested, yes, with baseball, but yes, with other uses. And I'm even happier to note that there will be other sport uses that will complement the baseball. So I'm in agreement with what is being proposed. And, of course, like you said, it may not be a white elephant, but we need to have a long-term use for this stadium. It's a fantastic stadium. It's very well located. There's a lot of potential. So let's give it a chance here. The proposal that's being tabled today is great, gives us a chance to have a longer-term vision, although 20 years may bring us in the right direction. Thank you.
Merci. Conseil Monette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as studying how much money has been put into it, I'd like to put another equation into that study if you're going to do how much it's been put into it. Can you also calculate how much economic development has the city benefited from having a stadium when it was in full use? How much tourism has been benefit to the city of Ottawa when it was in full use? And I guess it's going to be hard to equate into dollars, but it would be interesting to see how much the public has enjoyed this facility. Young families, children, people who play minor baseball, people who play major baseball, who would dream one day to be able to play in the stadium. I know when we had mothballed the stadium, we were able to get minor league baseball, and you should have seen the face of the kids when they were in that stadium. So yes, it is a baseball stadium, and we should maximize, try to use that stadium as much as we can. And like the mayor said, there is a cost to any facility, and if we're going to start just having facilities that make money, I think a lot of facilities will be closed in the city of Ottawa. So when you do your study, I don't know if it's possible for tourism, for economic development, but can you look into that aspect also?
Yes, Mayor, what I'd propose, the Councillor concurs, that we'll look at that from a staff perspective. We won't hire any external expertise, which would be required I think if you're looking at it for a full business case, but we'll look at what metrics are available to estimate the kind of economic spin-off that came from the activity.
Okay, and I'd like to really put everything on the table right now. This is a request for proposal, simply a request for proposal. Councillor Wilkinson touched on it. We are not bound by what we passed today to agree on anything. This will be coming back to council for future discussion. Am I correct?
You are correct.
As we look forward to, there are different options, which in the motion I brought forward looked at AAA, AA, single A as possible options. We also have an option of looking at independent leagues that might, such as Can-Am, that might put in a proposal and say, we could do a long-term lease here for 10 years, 20 years. We will not need $20-30 million to upgrade the stadium. $5 million or $3 million would be sufficient. That will be looked at also. Am I correct with that?
That is correct. If it was a smaller capital investment, I would likely recommend to council a shorter-term lease. But yes, that is an alternative that may materialize.
I'd just like a clarification as to why, and I know it was in my motion because I had brought it forward, but there is the aspect about the broker which I had not brought forward. Can you clarify why that's in that we will not negotiate with the broker?
That is based on our experience in the last series of discussions where we negotiated a lease with a broker. There wasn't an owner at the table at the time. We got into further extended negotiations about the lease when potential ownership groups came to the table, and we don't have the time for that, and frankly it's not, we believe, not the most effective process. So we want to know that a proposal is coming from an ownership group as indicated owns or will own a franchise that will be relocated. They have the experience and they have the support of the league in question.
Okay. Just in closing, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the motion. I think we have a stadium that's one of the nicest ones in Canada. I think what we have to do is find a partnership that will make it work. Will we ever be guaranteed that we will make money on it? We will never be guaranteed that. But will we ever be guaranteed that we can do our best to make a successful product on the field that will attract local residents to be able to enjoy the experience of going to a baseball game, whether it's affiliated or non-affiliated? I think we could guarantee that. I think that the stadium is a primary use as baseball. I agree with Councillor Fleury. We could look at other alternatives in conjunction with baseball. And this stadium has got a lot of potential, and I'll go on record right now that I will never vote to have it torn down, and I will always look to find an alternative
And if we cannot find a affiliated ball, then we'll have to look at non-affiliated and have the community have full access to the stadium. There is a lot of potential. It is a great stadium, and I don't want to be part of a council that votes to tear it down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My seating arrangement this morning is very opportune because I find myself thinking there's merit in what Councillor Jeans has said, and there's also merit in what Councillor Shirelli has said this morning. I think that we're getting near the end of looking at this project and trying to decide if we can make a go of it. On the other hand, I think that we need to give it one more, so to speak, college try. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. And that's why Councillor Manette's amendment concerns me, because I'm thinking that if brokers are out there within the various leagues, that's one of the ways of doing business. By the city saying we're not going to deal with a broker, we are cutting ourselves off potentially from potential deals, potential options out there, teams that may want to come forward, groups that may want to come forward, but choose to use an agent, a middleman, to help make that deal. And I get the sense that if we go along with the amendment of Councillor Manette, we're going to be cutting some of those people, some of those potential deals out and taking them off the table right away without knowing whether they're good or bad deals. And I've heard what you've had to say, as city manager, on the topic, and I'm not saying that's not without merit, but I'm not feeling comfortable with, before we know what the deals are, effectively cutting some of those deals out and saying don't bring them to the table because we're not going to deal with you because you have a broker. I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
I would say that this, as I described earlier, the scenario we had the last time was it was an agent that responded to the RFO. And it was then after the deal that the agent had proposed that council had agreed to, then we were sent away to negotiate a lease that that an owner, when one was brought to the table, would be accepting. Under this scenario, if an owner-operator wished to have consultants, wished to have an agent, wished to have a broker that was working with them or negotiating assisting them negotiating with the city, that's fine. But what wasn't there the last time and what this motion says needs to be there now is that the proposal is from the ownership group that proposes to relocate a franchise or bring a new franchise here and will own and operate that. That's who we want at the table when we begin negotiations.
So we're not going to rule someone out simply because they choose to have a go-between.
If a broker was part of going out there and helping a group decide that they wanted to respond to this RFO, and they were there as part of the proposal to the city, that's fine. But the ownership group has to be making the proposal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, and I will be supporting Councillor Manette's amendment now. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Chernachenko.
Just a clarification then first, Mr. Mayor. Are we purely taking questions here or questions and debate?
Questions and debate.
And debate, thank you, because mine certainly falls into the debate rather than the questions at this point. Part of me, perhaps the angel on my shoulder, said, don't press that button. And the devil said, yep, jump in, you've got to say something here. I've worked for more than 20 years previously in the sports and sports management field, involved with all sorts of organizations, building sports facilities, managing them, bidding on major games. And there's one thing that's absolutely true. Councillor Fleury, who's done his studies in this field as well, can echo this, I'm sure, which is a whole lot of public money has been spent on getting franchises, on building facilities, and on trying to keep them. Professional sports is heavily subsidized by the taxpayer. That's a reality of it. Elected officials have to decide whether they want to be doing that. But to pretend that public money isn't being spent on it and that somehow it will pay for itself and it will earn revenue runs counter to all of the studies internationally. It costs money to the taxpayer to have professional sport. We can judge for ourselves whether we think that's right or that's wrong. I think there's a fundamental difference between our recreation centers and a stadium like this. This is pretty much a one-use professional sport type of facility. It wasn't designed to have the broader public come in and use it often and have access to it. So I am completely comfortable with the idea that we pay for, out of tax dollars, our recreational facilities that the general public can use and does use as close to 365 days a year as possible. I'm extremely uncomfortable with a facility that is very lightly used and now has a prospect of not being much better than that. So I find myself at a point right now where I want it to work. I want baseball to come back to Ottawa and to make it work this time. All the facts tell me that it hasn't. Those glory days were basically 1 year where the Lynx filled the stadium, and I was there and my parents were there, and then it died, and it never came back. So we have to ask ourselves at some point, either today or after this next round, do we keep going back to the same well and expecting something different? I don't see a big risk and big cost to us passing the main motion here today to give it that one more college try. I think I'm ready to support that, but we really do have to be prepared to say no at some point if it doesn't work, or else we just keep throwing good money after that in the hope that Ottawa is going to become a baseball town when the facts may tell us otherwise. So I don't think I would want to limit our ability to engage with agents, but I do feel we should give it this one last try and be prepared to take what we get as the signal from the market on whether baseball ever can work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, there have been a lot of statements made. It's better served now than LRT will serve it, which is a well-researched statement, I'm sure. This is one of our assets, and it's been ignored for the past number of years. When the Expos had a farm team here, it was vibrant and alive and a fun place to be. It wasn't just 1 year. When the Expos were moved to Washington, the farm system moved with it, and ever since then we've been scrambling. The question now is, can we get an affiliated franchise, whether it's AA, single A, whatever it is moot. Can we do it? If it's affiliated, I think we'll be fine. We'll see the future stars. Suggest about cost, add up all the costs over the years. Well, we could add up all the cost of the O-train, for example, which I have no use for. But if you don't have a use for a baseball stadium, don't pan it. Talking about lost opportunities, we have a lot of real estate developers on this council, I can tell. In fact, the public believes that that's what we are. But the reality is that there are not very many lost opportunities. The suggestion that, for example, the pedestrian cycling bridge across the highway is somehow related to the stadium is incorrect. It's to service LRT from both sides of the highway. We get into these things, and this whole process that we've been in involves lessons learned. We've learned the expectations of the owners group, which weren't all the broker wanted to do is get something on the table so you can go run around with it. Well, brokers are what they are. They would sell you out in a minute as long as they got their commission. And I think it's appropriate then to move directly to principles. We talk about professional sports heavily subsidized. Certainly, in most cases, that's true. But you wouldn't suggest for a minute we close down Scotiabank Place. you wouldn't for a minute suggest we close down the Lansdowne football field. I think we need to have, like we do with everything else, a broad interest in what this community should have and a broad range of services. Amateur sports is heavily subsidized by the taxpayer, and not everybody has the ability to partake. A lot of seniors tell me, why are we paying for a ball stadium or a sportsplex? Because we don't use it. Why are we paying school taxes? Because we don't use it. This whole community is based on a weave of mutual caring and responsibility. The fact that the ball stadium, after years of neglect, is likely to cost us a little more to get it back in shape is a reality. But if you look at the pre-amalgamation city of Ottawa, it didn't do any maintenance on its roads and sewers for a long number of years. We're paying a fortune now to build that up. And it's a reality. The reality is that if you neglect your infrastructure, whether it's the stadium infrastructure, the sewer infrastructure, the roadway infrastructure, you pay a price, and usually a bigger one. And I think that what we need to do is try to remember, this is one community. We want to try to provide something for everybody in it, and we want to do it collectively, the way this council's been operating for the past 2.5 years.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Blois, would you like to introduce your motion to defer, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have a motion here. I think that that actually responds to some of the comments and concerns that I heard from others, even others who are professing support for the report before us, who have some of the similar concerns. So the motion basically is that this report be deferred and that staff assess or evaluate do an appraisal of the value of the site, and I mean the total site, that it's further resolved that staff gauge the market for development opportunities for the complete site, and it be further resolved that staff report back on the economic development value for the city. And Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm bringing this motion forward, there was already some uneasiness back in February of last year when we dealt with the previous reincarnation of this project, and the market has shown us that there isn't the real will and desire to have a baseball franchise in there. So we're going to go out and try it again. We're going to sweeten the pot, and we're going to try to do all kinds of things. In the meantime, there are missed opportunities out there, and these opportunities that are being lost could be bringing value to the city. And we always talk about economic development, every aspect that we bring forward. Well, there is an opportunity for economic development. I know my colleague wants staff to tell them what are the economic benefits of having an empty stadium. I can tell them what that is. I know you can't quantify, the joy on children's faces. There can't be much joy when they can't get into the stadium most of the time and when there's nothing going on there. It is a prime location. We're investing in the pedestrian overpass. There's one of the main LRT, not LRT stations, but transit stations as they're being converted to LRT. The train stations on the other side, the connectivity to the train yards. I think those are all positive developments. To somehow tie our hands with this proposal before us and to basically say we won't entertain anything for 10 years, and in 10 years' time, if somebody comes forward with a proposal, we're going to tie our hands further and say, by the way, anything you do with the parking lot, which is the only area you can develop, you're on the hook for making sure there's 850 spots in some way or another, and you've got to remedy the situation for whoever's in the baseball stadium, who probably isn't even covering the cost of the stadium at that point. So I heard something about learning lessons. Well, there is a lesson in history, and we've got lots of history here. And the lesson is don't repeat, repeat, repeat. Do something right and do it differently. The last thing is we can all follow the Pied Piper on this item and vote for the report before us or vote for this amendment. I think the right way to go, the prudent way to go, is to go back to staff. And I got to admit, I'm a little puzzled that staff would have brought this report forward. I don't know what the marching orders were, and don't take this the wrong way, but I would expect that there would have been more there saying, this is what we can do. This is the value of this land. This is what the future holds for the land, not to maintain an empty stadium that's going to cost us. And I know the 10 to 30 million isn't, I mean, it's referenced in the report, We're not committing to that cost. But the way government policy works, and there's a great document out there that talks about somebody who comes up with this idea, then we study the idea. The idea doesn't quite make it, so we study it some more, and suddenly it becomes fertile. It's, and in the end, it's a pile of manure. But that's, that document's floating around out there. This is the sense I get from the report before us, with all due respects to staff who wrote it, and I really think deferring the report is the right way to go, and looking at the opportunities is the right way to go. Thank you. And by the way, Mr. Mayor, while I still have a couple of seconds, I liked your comparison to community facilities, community halls. I don't know if you mentioned parks, libraries. Those are things that come very naturally to a city. And right now, we face a situation where we have stripped down our budget so much. For instance, our soccer facility is paid, every cent is paid for by user fees. We have parks right now. We don't even have $7,500 in our minor capital partnership in this year's budget to allow our communities that have raised $30,000 to $40,000 to get a canopy put up in their park because the $7,500 isn't there. If you're going to spend money, if you're going to invest money in community facilities, you put it in community halls, you put it in parks, you put it in what really serves your community. You don't put it in a stadium that may attract some ball players from somewhere else. Thank you.
Well, I think just to clarify, the reason this report is before us is because we as a council asked that it come back before us. So there's nothing out of the ordinary about this. So on deferral only, Councillor Shirelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, in that array of mixed metaphors, I know, mashed metaphors where we go from some, anyway, never mind, I'm not going to do them. Anyway,
on deferral,
this deferral motion, I think people need to step back and see the signal that this motion itself could send if we don't treat it properly. We have a proposal by staff that's there for a very good reason, and that reason is that there are other people interested who have come forward with other creative models for dealing with this. And our former way of doing it, or the former motions that we passed, didn't leave enough slack room for those to be considered. So the proposal, deferring the proposal, will mean we cut out those people and those groups from coming forward with their models and their solutions to our stadium's future. But if I think this deferral motion gives us an outstanding opportunity to signal to those out there who are interested that we are committed to the stadium and to doing our best to make a new partnership work. So I think a strong vote against this deferral motion does exactly that, tells those who are interested, and they are out there, that we're serious about this. And I think that's the really useful part of this motion, is it gives us a chance to defeat it.
Great. Thank you. Conseil Manette, s'il vous plaît, on deferral.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting deferral. As you know, we've had discussions for many years. Even last year, we had a discussion which a majority of council, if not unanimously, supported to go look at interested partners. All this does is says we will continue and try to find a partnership that might work for the stadium. As far as a motion, report back economic development for the city, hopefully the statement that I'm asking for an empty stadium, hopefully when you look for economic development, it is with the equation that it is for a stadium that does work, as well as when it was mentioned about doing the analysis of how much we spent into it. My question was, when it was working, how much economic development was a benefit and how much tourism benefits was a benefit to the city. Anyways, Mr. Mayor, I think we could look at deferring this. The longer we defer it, the more difficult we are going to make it to find partners. We had talked about potential 2015. Deferring it again will just make it more difficult to find a reasonable partner, a reasonable movement on this file. I will be supporting the motion that was presently on the table. I think it's time that we look at, see all interested parties and see what is on the table. At the end of that, well, we will have a serious discussion if we don't have any interest at all. But at this time, I do not support deferral. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Merci, Conseil. Councillor Deans on deferral, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief, but I do think it's important to note that this is not the first time that we've looked for another team. We've been doing this over and over and over and over again. And, what did Albert Einstein say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. I don't know why we expect a different result when every time we've gone down this path, we've found out that there isn't a team. And that's the reality. And the cost of having an empty stadium is a real cost to our taxpayers. I thought Councillor Blois made a really good point. Our Parks and Rec budgets are strained. We can't put the money into Parks and Recreation in this city that we should be putting into it, and yet we put millions of dollars into an empty stadium. And I think it's not fair to compare the thousands and thousands of visits that our community centers and our libraries get every year and the communities that they serve with an empty stadium that doesn't get visits. And, just ask yourself this. Over the last 15 years, how many days has that stadium been empty? How many days has there been no visits while the taxpayers have been paying the bill? And I think that we need to have that information because council can only make good decisions if we have all the information. I think we need to know how much it's costing us to have an empty stadium sitting there that the taxpayers continue to pay for. And I think the time has come that I'm not saying tear down the stadium. I'm saying let's explore the options and let's understand the finances and the economics of keeping an empty stadium and continuing down this path over and over again. Council cannot govern by nostalgia or emotion. We have to govern by fact and by the numbers and by the overall community well-being of making that kind of decision. We need to have evidence-based decisions. We need to have more evidence about what this has caused, how empty that stadium has been, how many days have there been nobody there, and what is it that we're giving up financially in terms of other parks and recreation programs in the city that we could have funded if we weren't putting money into that empty stadium. And nobody's saying make a decision today. We're just saying take the time at this point in this process to explore the options and at least understand what the opportunities are before we go down this path yet another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, please, on deferral.
Mr. Mayor, if you look at the report in detail, the timelines for the report are to have a response by the end of this year. If you start deferring it now, there will be no response by the end of this year. So in other words, deferring it is a sense saying that we're finished with it. So I will not support deferral. I will support the timelines that are in the report. We will have an answer before the end of this year, and we will know what we're voting on in terms of potential costs, potential value added, and all those other things. In fact, if I remember some of the stuff that's in here already, staff has agreed to look into it.
Thank you. Councillor El Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On a deferral, Mr. Mayor, this discussion reminds me of the Canada Council 22 years ago when they talk about the senator coming to Canada at the time. And this is the same discussion. I'm not really a pro-ball or not. All I'm saying, we ask staff for that report. And if the report came in and some of us don't like it, we start calling it name and accusing staff for preparing something we didn't like. Well, next time, if you don't want to hear from staff, don't ask them for a report. So I will not be deferred this item. I will be voting for the report. And we'll wait and see. If that doesn't happen, well, we can always demolish the stadium and put a high-rise, as everybody likes to see.
Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Aguilar on deferral, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one quick question for staff and then a comment on the deferral motion. If this motion was to go ahead and be successful this morning, based on the work that you've done so far, Mr. Kirkpatrick, what would be the impact on a potential deal if we deferred and sent you back to do the various research that's been requested?
It would mean that there is no chance for a tenant to be operating baseball in that stadium in 2015. And some of the indication that we had from some of the prospective owners we were talking to the last time around, there is a connection between when they could start and their interest in being here to start at all.
Sorry, can you explain that last statement?
Some of the people, the prospective owners that we spoke to, they are interested, but they are interested in starting in 2015. The longer it is delayed in terms of when they could potentially start, markets change, things become more, there's less predictability. So that I think, to put it bluntly, I apologize. I think the marketplace, there's greater interest in being able to be here if they're able to start in the 2015 season versus seasons past that time.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to be supporting deferral. One of the main reasons that I ran for council last election was, what I kept hearing from people was the council of the day deferred things, reconsidered things, put things off. This is a council so far that has been a doing council. We've taken projects in hand and we've moved them forward. We've done that with LRT, we've done that with the Lansdowne Park, and this is another project that we have to make the decision on and we have to move it forward. To my colleagues that have said we've discussed this and it's been around for a long time, it has been around for a long time, so now we have to make that final decision and move forward or not move forward. And I think that the plan that staff has put forward is a comprehensive and efficient way of dealing with this, and at the end of the day, if they come back with a deal that we don't like, as Councillor El-Shantiri said, we don't have to accept it, and at that point we can say tear her down or do something different. But I'm proud of the way this council has operated in moving things forward, and I don't want to see the slippage that would bring us back to the previous council and things get stalled, projects don't happen, and residents get frustrated with the lack of action at the council table. So I'm going to go against deferral, and I'm going to support this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tierney, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to echo some of the points that Councillor Eglai made. At the same time, I think we all are concerned how long this is taking. Now, Rome wasn't built in a day. I will be going against deferral as well, and I'll also be bringing forward a friendly amendment to put a time frame on the staff proposal so we can actually say, what's a good number, 1, maybe 2 years? Is there a point where we go, there's a tipping point, and we have to say, okay, we have to make some new decisions. So I'll be working with staff right now to see if I can get that friendly amendment put together and put some kind of parameters around how far we're going to go with this. Is that even possible, Mr. O'Connor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much.
I think maybe we should explain, though, there are some time limits because this has to come back in order to meet the deadline, Mr. Kirkpatrick, because I think Councillor Tierney's point is a good one, but I believe you have a timeline to come back to council this fall, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the timeline's identified in the report.
Okay. So if you're satisfied with that, Councillor, I think that accomplishes what you're trying to do. And we do have a timeline because the baseball schedule for winter meetings and so on is such. Is that satisfactory to you? Okay. Okay, on anyone else on deferral? I'm just going to speak very briefly against a deferral for a number of reasons. This was a report that our council asked for, and staff have come back and respected council's view. Deferring it is not going to solve the problem. I think it's only going to complicate the problem. I had a great opportunity on the weekend to be with Councillor Eglai and Councillor Shirelli at the 40th anniversary of the Nepean Sportsplex, and Councillor Harder was there as well. And I could well imagine back 40 years ago the debate that took place around the Nepean council table at that time. This is way too expensive, it's too ambitious, who's heard of a complex before? Because everything was very much a single pad use or a single gymnasium. And yet they had the wisdom and the foresight to move forward, and it's become a role model. And today we're with Councillors Harder and Moffat and DeRush and Wilkinson and Hobbs at the naming ceremony for the new complex in Barrhaven. And then we have a new complex coming in Canada this fall. There were lots of people, I suspect, back in the day that said, you know, let's give up on building an East End Arts Center. And the number of failures that went into eventually seeing the creation of the Schenkman Center, and people didn't give up, they didn't defer, they didn't, you know, throw in the towel or wave the white flag. So the notion that we've been trying this time and time again, this council's only tried this once. We were not successful, and we're being asked to go back a second time. Lessons learned of what happened in the last go-around. We're not asking for any dollars above and beyond the life cycle maintenance dollars and permission for staff to go and rent out the facility for community use on an interim basis. So I think it would send a very negative signal to any potential investor if a number of people vote for deferral, or if even deferral wins. It would in essence kill this process, and we'd be back probably in another year trying to decide what to do with the stadium, and guess what? The stadium will deteriorate even more. So the notion that we keep pouring money into an empty stadium is not quite true. The fact is that successive councils have not put the dollars into the stadium to maintain it. I remember our old city manager, and Councillor Deans will remember John Burke very well. He used to call the baseball stadium Lansdowne in training, because we saw what happened when you don't put enough resources and attention at Lansdowne. Guess what happens? A building is condemned, it has to be shut down. Another building has to be shut down on the second floor. So we don't want to go down that path. We have an investment, tax dollars paid for this site, and we want to at least see if there are other opportunities to use the baseball stadium on a go-forward basis. All of us will have a very serious discussion if we're not successful in this round. Because at some point you can't keep going on and on and on. You have to decide, all right, what is the next plan for that site? And that will be a more challenging debate for all of us around the table. There's no question about that. But to simply give up and have this defeatist attitude after one attempt, I think is irresponsible on our part, and I'd urge you to vote against deferral. So on deferral, yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Wilkinson?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor Blois?
Yes.
Councillor Clark?
No.
Councillor Holmes?
No.
Councillor Eglai?
No.
Councillor Blais?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Shirelli?
No.
Councillor El Shantiri?
No.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
No.
Councillor Harder?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Councillor Tierney?
No.
Councillor Thompson?
No.
Councillor DeRush?
No.
Councillor Hume? No. Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Hobbs?
No.
Councillor McCrae?
No.
Councillor Manette?
No.
Councillor Caudry?
No.
Councillor Fleury?
No. No.
Mayor Watson?
No.
2 yeas, 22 nays.
Okay, that's defeated. Next, we have Councillor McCrae's motion, seconded by Councillor Monette, with respect to reasonable efforts. Carried. Following is Councillor Monette, seconded by Councillor Clark's motion on brokers. Carried. On the main report as amended. Carried. Dissent by Councillor Blois and Deans. Okay. Next is on page 25 of your agenda. Motion to adopt reports. Councillor El Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holm, that Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee Report 23B and 31A and 32, Environment Committee Report 22, Finance and Economic Development Committee Report 30A and 33, Planning Committee Report 50, and Transportation Committee Report 27 be received and adopted as amended. Okay.
Carried. Thank you. Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avis a été donné entièrement. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Aguilar. Whereas the formal process for bringing local improvements to the Court of Revision only began in December 2012, and whereas several of the local improvements constructed by the City of Ottawa date from the year 2001 to 2006 period, and whereas given the passage of time, the money set aside by some homeowners for paying these local improvements may have been utilized for other purposes, and it is fair and equitable for the City to provide for interest relief for those local improvements that date from 2001 to 2006 period. Therefore, be it resolved that for those local improvements approved by Council prior to November 30th, 2006, no interest shall accrue prior to January 1st, 2019 on the condition that the equal annual payments are made commencing no later than June 30th, 2014, and that such annual payments are not in arrears. And be it further resolved that this interest waiver shall end in respect of any property sold subsequent to the notice of the first applicable Court of Revision meeting for such property. Mr. Mayor, I can tell you that for whatever reason, we are a long way back in collecting these fees for local improvements. And as my grandmother used to say, in all that time, there's a lot of water that goes under the bridge. And we went out to a public meeting in my ward, and I think Ms. Similek and Mr. O'Connor will tell you that it's not that people don't feel that they should pay, but they do feel that when 10 years or more has lapsed, that their economic and financial situations in many cases have changed, and they made a compelling point, I think, that an interest relief would be in order given that the city didn't bill them for a 10-year period. So, Mr. O'Connor, I just wanted to ask you if you could comment on this and say whether or not the city is recommending this.
Mr. Mayor, from my office's point of view, I can confirm that myself, Mr. Mark, the Treasurer, and Alain Gauthier did, in fact, attend the public meeting in the ward councillor's ward. I will also advise that people spoke very passionately about this. They spoke very candidly about the fact that this was a matter that was more than a decade in the making, so to speak. And I think it was also very candid when they indicated that while some of the residents may have set aside funds originally to pay this matter off in a timely fashion, that other exigencies had arisen in household matters, and as the councillor indicated, personal circumstances meant that they spent the money elsewhere. So with regards to the motion before you, I can advise that my office is in favor of this, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Derash.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I want to follow up just on that point with Mr. O'Connor. Many of us have projects in our ward that are both new and old local improvements. They're very difficult processes to watch because the stakes are high for some of the homeowners, and it can be a very costly process. So I just want to make sure, Mr. O'Connor, that what we approved in this motion is not just a special case for this this part of the city, that we're not according this group certain benefits that are not accorded to the existing and most recent local improvements that are underway.
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe it's necessarily based on just the circumstances of this particular community. Staff advised that, again, this is based on a timeline from 2001 to 2006, which staff have tried to be reasonable about setting with regards to expectations, and there would be any number of 5 or 6 local improvement over that period of time. Staff now tell me there's 8 over that period of time.
And they would receive the same benefit as this section of the city?
If council passes it, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo what Councillor Dean said. I've talked to some of the homeowners involved in this. I appreciate the work that Mr. O'Connor and Mr. Mark have done on this, and I know the residents do as well. And they've made it very clear that they understand that they need to honor this debt. But what has happened is over the time period, they thought they had already paid it off because of the tax increases over those years were much higher than what this council has been able to deliver for residents. So it was not as noticeable that that segment of the payment wasn't in there. So I really appreciate Councillor Dean's motion to give them a little further break on the interest so that they can honor their debt that they agreed to. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hubley. Councillor Moffat, please.
Thank you. I know, along with the Councillor Caudry and Councillor Harder, I happen to sit on the core revision for these and these local improvements. And I know we've had several come forward, and Council had a motion that helped address some issues where maybe the ownership of the property changed and they weren't realistically aware. But I don't necessarily know that. I mean, all these people that signed up for this, you have to have 60% of people in favor. They all know what they're getting into when it comes about. And I guess, I think we have, maybe 11, 12 of these outstanding. The largest one happens to involve Manotick. Most of these are about 60 homeowners at most. Manotick is over 500. So 500 different residences and businesses are involved, and that comes in about 2008, 2009. That period went through. The construction period was 2009, 2010. I just want to know, it looks arbitrary. The 2006 date, it's very convenient for certain situations across the city, but it is quite arbitrary in my opinion, and I'd just like to get some information on why 2006.
Mr. Mayor, there were three reasons that appeared to staff to justify a break at that time. Based in term of council was 2 terms of council ago. There was a change in legislation. It went from the quarter revision to the committee revision between 2006 and 2007. And there was also a 2-year break at that point between local improvements, one being in 2006, the next one being Winding Way in 2008. And so it seemed to staff that 2008 moving forward could be considered more timely, and that's why in assisting Councillor Deans with the motion, staff came up with the recommendation that the interest relief apply to 2001 to 2006.
So the residents before 2006 were less aware there'd be interest than the residents after 2008? I'm just trying to figure out why we're giving some reprieve and not others. What would the cost be if we just said no interest on all of them to this date?
The cost would be approximately about $1.5 million.
And what's the cost for the 2001-2006 period?
Approximately $171,000.
That makes sense, considering I said mine was the largest. I think if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna say that, just happened to be luck of the draw that theirs were before 2006, they're all fully aware what they got into when they signed on to a local improvement. Everyone is when they do so. I know the period, the process that went through Manotick, and I know how divisive it was and how contentious it was for the residents involved, but they know what they got into when they signed up for them. They know there was interest. They have the ability to pay up front in one lump sum with no interest, or they can pay over a period of time. Some of those are 10 years, some of those are 20 years. I don't necessarily think that at the time they feel that, well, maybe we'll throw the dice and hopefully in a few years we'll get a reprieve. I mean, maybe I should orchestrate that the Manotick one gets delayed for 2 or 3 years and then come back to council and say, oh, how about I get a reprieve then? I don't think that's fair. I really don't. So if we're going to either do this, I say we do it for all of them, or we do it for none of them. So I have to prepare a motion then to recommend that we exempt every single one of them from interest. If we're going to do the ones from 2001 to 2006, I say we do them from 2008 to 2012.
Do you have a seconder?
It's going to be seconded by Councillor Harder.
All right, so we'll have to ask staff for the consequences of that. While we get that printed out, Councillor Wilkinson, please.
You're going to do that? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to check, if we go with the 2006, the one in my area has already been heard, but it is in that one because it was the oldest one. That's why it was done first. It would actually apply to that one as well then.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And what I don't know from what was said before is how much income is the city going to lose, because even at the 2006 deadline, there must be a significant amount for this, 6 years of no interest.
The calculation is approximately $171,000 for the projects that were pre-2006 and before. The entire amount, though, because the big ones actually are more current, is a total of approximately between, I'd say, $1.25 and $1.5 million.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's somewhat disappointing that we're finally getting around to addressing this. The costs of not addressing it have been significant. On the other hand, these local improvements and any others that we contemplate are signed up by the residents in full awareness of the total cost of the project at that time. And as Councillor Moffat said, they could pay all of it, or they could put it on taxes over a 10-year period, or 20 even sometimes, depending on the size of it. So when we start talking about this, this is not about, this motion is to give them relief for interest where the interest was incurred 7-8 years ago minimum, up to 15. Well, frankly, I don't know whether we should be forgiving them interest at all. I certainly don't agree that we need to extend that to spending $1.5 million for the to level the playing field, so to speak. I certainly wouldn't support extending it all the way. I certainly contemplate voting against extending it at all after that discussion. I believe that when we get into this routine of local improvement, we have to administratively get it so that it's regular as opposed to once every 12 years. And I really need some confirmation that we are not going to let any more of these slip through the door.
Mr. Mayor, it's certainly going to be staff's intent to be much more vigilant with regards to these matters. And I did want to make one minor clarification with regards to the 8 local improvement charge areas that were that may be subject to this type of dispensation. 2 of them were actually city-driven projects, so they weren't under the petition process. So those individuals did not have a say, so to speak.
Anything else, Councillor Clark?
Well, at the end of it, I just will vote against both of these motions.
Okay. Point of order, Councillor Shirelli.
Thank you, Your Worship. My point of order is we had a notice of motion from Councillor Deans. I think the motion, the so-called amendment from Councillor Moffat is really a separate motion covering a different time period for which I think we should have received notice. So I'm asking for a ruling if whether Councillor Moffat's motion is really a notice of motion.
No, it's an amendment. He's asking that they all be covered. I believe that's the case, Councillor Moffat.
The amendment is bigger than the substance of the first motion.
No. Yeah. No, it's not a point of order, but I thank you for your input. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put my name as seconder because I wanted to have the discussion, quite frankly. As Councillor Moffat said, Councillor Kadri, Councillor Moffat, and I have the unenviable job of being the Court of Revision. And if I'm successful in the next election, just to be on the record, I won't be on it the next time. It is, I think that I understand individually where everybody's coming from who have these local local area charges impacting parts of their ward. But make no, and actually before I go on, I want to ask one question. Where are the 2 that you say that were not in control of being a party to an agreement?
Mr. Mayor, they are Paget and Innes. There was an attempt to petition for the Paget Road local improvement, but they didn't have sufficient support, and the Innes one was completely initiated by the city.
And so which side of the tally are they on? Are they going to get nailed with the interest, or are they going to get off without it?
Mr. Mayor, they are in the 2001 to 2006 group.
Okay. So, you see, when you think about it, those two, I think you could argue a case that they should be forgiven. We've had a couple of meetings at the Court of Revision, and we had a fairly contentious one on Leggett. And so now, as Councillor Wilkinson said, that one, she's brought up the fact, well, it was before 2006, so therefore that would have to be adjusted too, which I'm sure would alter the figures as well. And we're talking, when you're talking $171,000, it's still $171,000, especially after, you know, the pressures that we know that we're all facing in our parks and any number of places, really. And in the fact, Mr. Mayor, that you've led the charge on holding the line on user fees for every year of this term of council. So, with the exception of the Paget and the Innes then, everybody else knew that this was the deal. And as I said to one person who came to the court, so basically you're telling me you just thought you got lucky, that you didn't get a bill in the mail. And really that's the fact. And I know that the easy thing for me to do today would be to support the motion that I seconded to have this discussion, but I don't think it's the right thing to do for fairness. I don't think it's the right thing to do for the city. $171,000 is a lot of money, and a little over $1 million is a lot of money, and there's a lot better things we can do with it. So I think the problem is that where we've got into trouble is that we've had ownership changes and due diligence hasn't been done and lawyers haven't checked the original deeds and things like that so that they could follow the deal from start to finish. And we've heard that at the Court of Revision. And I know that the easy thing to do would be to vote to take any interest charges off of everybody for Councillor Moffat, myself, and Councillor Kadri. But I don't think it would be the right thing to do for the city. A deal is a deal, and I'm really not looking forward to having the 100 people come out that somebody signed the deal for on their behalf. But I don't think, unless we're willing to spend $1.5 million and write that off, Mr. Mayor and everybody, I don't think we should be writing off $171,000 either. Thank you.
I think what Councillor Harder said reflects certainly my position as well, and I appreciate her perspective, and I know she seconded the motion to have the discussion. Councillor Blais.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, we've had 2 or 3 weeks to consider Councillor Dean's motion. The financial impacts of the Moffat-Harder amendment are potentially significant. I move that we refer the amendment to the Finance and Economic Development Committee so that a proper report on its impacts, on the financial impacts, et cetera, can be presented to council so that we can have a more fulsome discussion and understand precisely what it is that we'd be agreeing to instead of trying to work it on the fly on a napkin this afternoon.
Yep. So the whole thing?
No, the Harder Moffat amendment.
All right, so we have a motion now to refer this to FEDCO. I would urge members of council not to support referral. We've had a very strong opinion from the Treasurer and from our senior legal counsel that the Dean's Egli motion makes sense. There's rationale behind it. There's legal justification for it. But as Councillor Harder pointed out, we all of a sudden accept the Moffat motion, it becomes a free-for-all. And it sends a very bad signal that, maybe if we're late sending a bill in a couple of weeks on something else, guess what? That'll set the precedent. Well, let's just hold our breath and make sure we don't get that bill. So I think, with all due respect to Councillor Moffat, I understand where he's going because he has some constituents that are seeing this debate go on and say, why should some constituents get in and not others? I think the 3 rationale points that Mr. Mark brought forward do make sense. They make sense to support the Dean's Egli motion, and equally they support us not supporting the Moffat motion. So we do have a motion from Councillor Blais to refer the Moffat-Harder motion, which, as we now know, Harder doesn't support, but you'll keep your name on it, I suppose? Okay. To FEDCO. So I would, Councillor Moffat?
I'll withdraw it. I mean, the intent was either you do them all or you do none.
Yeah.
That's my points.
Okay.
I'm not in favor of doing any of them.
Okay.
But I'll withdraw that.
Okay. All right. So we have the Dean's Eglai motion carried. Yeas and nays. Okay. Madam Deputy Clerk, yeas and nays on Councillor Dean's motion, seconded by Councillor Eglai.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Councillor Blois?
Yes.
Councillor Clark? Councillor Holmes?
Yes.
Councillor Eglai? Conseiller Blais?
We.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Al-Shantiri?
Yes.
Councillor Chernyshenko?
Yes.
Councillor Harder?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
Conseiller DeRoche?
No.
Councillor Hume? Councillor Deans?
Yes.
Councillor Hobbs?
Yes.
Councillor McCrae?
Yes.
Conseiller Manette?
Yes.
Councillor Caudry?
No.
Conseiller Fleury?
No.
Mayor Watson?
Yes.
19 yeas, 5 nays.
It's a very historic moment because Councillor Thompson supported a Councillor Dean's motion, so congratulations to you both. That's right. Councillor DeRush has a motion seconded by Councillor El-Shantiri, which has been given previous notice. Councillor DeRush on the motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday I had the
I'm sorry,
opportunity...
Councillor Blois has a conflict. Councillor Blois, please.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, I need to declare a potential deemed pecuniary interest in the DeRush El-Shantiri motion, as my son is a member of the Armed Forces.
Okay, so Councillor Blois is leaving his chair. Councillor DeRush, to introduce your motion, please. Councillor Blais, on a point of order.
For not having indicated this earlier, but I also have a potential conflict of interest and should remove myself from this particular discussion.
Okay, so Councillor Blais has declared a conflict and he'll step away from the chair. Is there anyone else? No. Okay, Councillor DeRush, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday I had the opportunity to attend the swearing-in of the badge ceremony for our new police recruits. I was joined by yourself, Mr. Mayor, and the Chief of Police, Councillor El-Shantiri, as well as Councillor Harder. And what struck me was out of a dozen or so officers, 5 of them were very proudly wearing their military medals, many from the Afghanistan war. And it struck me that we are on the right track if we are hiring and recruiting people who have military experience, who I think can very easily convert those skills and abilities to jobs here at the City of Ottawa. So some time ago, Mr. Mayor, I was approached by the Parliamentary Secretary of Veterans Affairs of a national initiative to hire veterans who are retiring or who are leaving the military. What this motion is calling on, Mr. Mayor, is that we participate in this program. It is really a simple notion that we share our job postings with Veterans Affairs so that they can then distribute them to the veterans community, and they have an opportunity to compete for these jobs. We would also, I think, Mr. Mayor, take the opportunity to reach out to the military community here in the City of Ottawa. This is the headquarters of the Department of National Defense, and I think over the years there has been perhaps a bit of a curtain between the residents and the military community here, and I think there is some considerable benefit if we start to reach out to them, because we do recruitment for firefighting, we do recruitment for the police, we do, as a city, promote that we are a great employer. And so I'd like to see staff include the military on their outreach and recruitment activities. And this motion, I think, Mr. Mayor, is appropriate for the nation's capital, a city that has a very large military community that we see almost on a daily basis when we're commuting into work or if we're walking around the downtown core. So I'm asking for the support of colleagues that we sign up for this initiative, and I can tell you that it's a motion that is supported by staff, and they see it as being feasible and really does not incur any additional expense to the City of Ottawa. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Thanks to Councillor DeRush and El Shantiri. On the motion, carried. Motions requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. We have at least two that I'm aware of. Councillor Chernachenko, please. On suspension for construction of parking facility over top O-Train. On suspension, carried. Councillor Chernachenko, please.
Yes, thank you. I just had some clarification on this item. Do we have a motion up in front of us? Others need them?
Can we get the motion out on the screen, please?
Just thought my colleagues might want to know what I'm talking about. For once. This is a request for noise exemption at Carleton. Oddly enough, I am moving a motion for a noise bylaw exemption to allow overnight work when I can hear it from my own bedroom window. So it's with much trepidation that I bring this forward, and I'm in favor of it. But I wanted to clarify from staff, Mr. Suchin, can you were going to look into more of the specifics of what type of work and what sort of work would not be allowed. Our understanding was certainly that no one's going to be using pile drivers during the night, that it was fairly specific in the type of work that would be allowed.
Yes, through the Mayor, to you, Councillor. The pile driving, much to your pleasure, will end at 9 p.m. at night and will only extend till about the 20th of July.
What type of activity then will be permitted under this?
What Carleton is looking for is to, after the pile driving is complete, to do some excavation work for a following week after that. And then following that into early August, the bulk of the work at night will be more crane swings as they put together, almost for lack of a better word, a mechano set of the parking structure. So it's delivery trucks, not dump trucks, but delivery of the grade beams and the work of the cranes.
And one, I know you're not the project manager here on the site, but I certainly know that with Lansdowne, a lot of effort was put into silencing the beepers of vehicles where that was possible. With some vehicles that is possible, with others it's not, and there was a type of muffling and using of signals instead during overnight operations. Do we have the ability to put those, suggest if not impose those sorts of special measures on the site?
Yes, we can impose this. With our agreement, we have a very exhaustive MOU with Carleton University for the construction of the parking facility, and we have the ability to make such requests, mandatory.
And just for clarity for everyone, the motivation for this, this is not I suppose a private sector operator or developer that is looking to save money by speeding up the work. As I understand it, it's actually, you could say it's the city imposing the deadline through the need to put the O-Train back into operation by a hard date.
That is correct. The city is doing work on expanding the O-Train now. The O-Train is shut down until August 29th, and then they'll do some track testing, and then it'll be in operation on September 3rd. Carleton has to be out of our way by that date. There's a drop-dead date. They had a very aggressive schedule. There was very little slippage in it, and we're getting to the point now that they needed to work at night to meet the drop-dead date of getting out of our way by the 29th of August.
and without which we would, in fact, not have the O train back by a date where we have to.
Well, the O train will go. Carleton would suffer costs of having to stop work and coming back to the site sometime in the spring. So the O train will be in operation. It's just this is to give Carleton the ability to finish the work needed prior to the O train starting.
Okay, thank you, and I guess I and my neighbors will grin and bear it, but work with the city and Carleton to limit this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reality is that the nearest homes are, I think, 900 meters away, which is twice the distance, I think, of what an acceptable bus stop is. The fact is that Carleton University, and I know this for a fact when speaking with Mr. McNair and with Robin and other people, and with people from Carleton, this has been a very, very difficult project for them, okay? And it's costing tons of money to the university, and as you heard, it needs to happen because of the work that we need for the O train. So let's just vote for it.
Okay. So we carry.
There. All in favor? Carried. Next, notice of motion requiring suspension of the rules, or motion rather, is Councillor Fleury on Canada Day on the suspension of the rules. Carried. Councillor.
We canceling Canada Day?
Carried.
It's the same motion as
by law exemption for Canada Day. Carried. Okay. Are there any other motions requiring suspension of the rules? Notice is a motion for consideration at subsequent meeting. Councillor DeRush and seconded by Councillor Harder. Introduced, please, Councillor DeRush.
Mr. Mayor, this is a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Harder. It deals with the 60th anniversary of the end of the Korean War and the 50th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Canada and South Korea. I'm asking that Council recognize that this is the year of the Korean veteran. It is recognized by the Government of Canada, and that we take steps to commemorate this very special milestone through a flag raising and through a proclamation for the week of June 25th to July 1st, and that a park in my ward be named after a local Korean veteran who's been an outstanding citizen for the City of Ottawa by the name of Mr. Gus Est, and his name has been submitted to the commemorative naming process, and I'll be asking for Council's approval at the next meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other notices of motion? Est-ce qu'il y a des autres avis de motion?
Any other notice of motions?
Bylaws, Councillor El Shantiri and Councillor Holmes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Holmes, that the bylaws listed on the agenda under motion to introduce bylaw 3 reading be read and passed.
Carried.
Carried. Confirmation bylaw, Councillor.
That the following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceeding of council meeting of 12 June 2013.
Carried.
Is the item carried?
Carried. Thank you. Inquiries, Councillor Blais. Direction to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to introduce the notice of motion, but staff have indicated they're happy to take this as direction. So with the will of council to waive the rules to offer some direction to our city staff.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. The direction is that Mr. Kirkpatrick write a letter to the province to reaffirm the City of Ottawa's position that OR 174 should be uploaded to provincial responsibility and request the province assume full responsibility and obligation for OR 174 as soon as possible, and that if a response to the city's request is no, staff asks the province to allow the city, by way of an appropriate regulation, to designate parts of OR 174 as a toll highway under subsection 40-1 of the Municipal Act 2001 if council chooses to do so in the future.
So there'll be a direction to staff, and staff will come back with a report. Councillor Fleury, did you?
It's for another inquiry.
Okay. Councillor Blois on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know from the clerk, in terms of the status of any requests that we've made in the past, and you may recall that, well, first of all, this term, Mr. Mayor, there was a motion that Councillor Manette had made with respect to uploading the 174, which I believe you ruled out of order. But there had been previous requests to the province to upload the 174. I wonder if the clerk's office can remind us of those requests and what happened to them.
Mr. Mayor, I'm certainly aware that on October 13th, 2004, Council did in fact make this same request, which the Council is seeking the direction on in this instance. So I'll go back and check what the ministerial response was at that point in time and include it.
My recollection was that at the time that the local ministers were all copied, and Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure if you were one of the local ministers at the time, but I don't recall a response. I don't recall whether we actually ever received a response. And
I'll have to check on that, Mr. Mayor, but I'll certainly advise members of Council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleury has a written inquiry. Councillor.
Merci, Monsieur le Maire. Oui, j'ai une demande de renseignement.
Yes, I have an inquiry. Which department deals with fire hydrants, and what do we do about the ones on private properties? The city staff has a procedure to maintain these fire hydrants on private and public properties. Thank you. Any other inquiries?
Adjournment, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't receive anything from you, Councillor Blois.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm just writing it out now, we became aware, I think, earlier this week that some emails were being blocked, whether to staff or whatever. And my inquiry is, if this has been a common practice, who would authorize any blockage of emails, and has any of this applied to city councillors?
Mr. Kirkpatrick, do you have an answer for that now, or do you want to reply?
I'd rather get it in writing later.
Okay. Mr. Kirkpatrick?
I think the councillor indicated he'd like it in writing.
Okay.
Yes.
If you can write that out, Councillor Blois.
Yeah.
Any other written inquiries? Councillor El Shantiri, adjournment, please.
I'm going to read this quick before somebody changes mind. That the proceeding of the City Council meeting of June 12, 2013 be adjourned.
Carried. Adopté. Merci beaucoup. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.